Okay.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us all. We have the big crew here. And actually, wave, everybody wave. Um, we may end up having more of an audience beside just our normal, I guess normal is not
Ooh.
probably the right word, but an expanded audience versus just the Scientology folks. So after I get us going here, I would love to have you guys do an introduction of yourselves, just a quick introduction of who you are, and that way it's not too surprising for folks. But again, welcome to our Scientology Crimes Legal Panel. I'm Fat Grammy, Mona, and I'm going to try and facilitate this topic today, but we have way more incredibly intelligent and special guests than myself with us to talk about the legal, criminal, and civil filings of a sexual abuse claim. So we're mainly going to talk about California and Florida because that is where the two main headquarters are for Scientology. And we may have more expanded group today. So as I said, we're going to introduce ourselves just in case someone is unfamiliar with who we are. Of course, in our community, these next beautiful and bright ladies are completely known. But for any newbies, I will let you introduce. And after that, I'll do a brief introduction and then we're going to dig right into it. So, who wants to volunteer to go first? Mirriam?
I'll volunteer as tribute. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to us. My name is Mirriam Frances. I was born and raised in Scientology's core called the Sea Org, and I experienced crimes as I grew up in that environment. And for the last nearly 13 years now, I've pursued a criminal outcome in two countries, in the U.S. and in Australia. So I have personal experience. I'm not an expert in this area at all, but just based on my lived experiences and personal experiences. And I just want to do my best to inform people and help people. Yeah.
Excellent. Nora,
Okay.
you're up.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing the floor for me, Mona. I appreciate that. For those of you who don't know, my channel is What's Up with Nora. I'm Nora Ames, born and raised in Scientology. What else is there to say? I've seen every episode of Law and Order ever created, so my legal knowledge is vast. I've also seen every other television show that's ever been made about law and order and crime. So there you go. And I'm currently on a binge of watching Netflix murder documentaries. So I'm ready to appear, Your Honor, for court. But this is serious stuff. Let's be serious. I also have the flu, guys. So if I am blowing my nose proficiently, or that's not the right word, see, this is why I'm not a lawyer, but, a lot. That's why. But,
Profusely.
profuse, thank you. It was the other P word. I knew it was a P word. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing this on YouTube now for quite a while, advocating and telling the truth about Scientology and our stories and people like me and Mirriam who grew up in Scientology, and just trying to keep on getting the word out there. And thank you for the whole chat and everyone who's like, it's profusely, Nora. Take this. And then we have a real legal representation here. Carrie, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm CarrieJ. I am an attorney licensed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, have been for over 20 years. My experience is primarily criminal and child welfare, so children who are removed from the care of their parents. So child abuse is something, unfortunately, that was part of my day-to-day life, not as a victim, but as someone who was responding to it, standing up for people who were going through that, and helping the court do something about it. And I can't stand watching legal shows because they're so wrong. It drives me crazy. So
That's why it's a beautiful thing. I mean, everyone has to know that Law and Order is the most ridiculous thing ever, because you see the crime, then you see the cops like interrogate the person for 5 seconds, they get the confession, then they go to the courtroom, and of course, the great lawyers in there just lawyer it up, and the judge is like, "What? Oh my God, you're amazing!" And then that's it. Like, it's a half an hour, it's a tight. We wish that this is how.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that be great? Instead of things taking like literally years to even like move an inch sometimes through our legal system. But that's for good reason, so that people who are innocent get a fair shake. But sometimes, as we know, people who aren't innocent fall through the cracks because of that also. So, yeah.
Well, and as I had said
So,
before,
and
I am Fat Grammy, and the reason I have that name, I've told many people before, and I even have a small video about it, is because when I was 5, 6 years old, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up, and I said I want to be an international corporate lawyer. When I was that young, that's what I wanted to do in life, and that was my trajectory, or be a fat grandma. Hey, I succeeded at one, man. I succeeded at one. So and my Grammy was the bestest Grammy in the entire world. So in honor of fat grandmas everywhere. Yes.
Well, I think that's so beautiful, and that is a big job, and I'm so looking forward to being a grandmother. It's going to be quite a while from now, but I just think that's going to be the best. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we started off our morning sunshines with a video that I promised Traveltology that I would find, and Cece that I would find, and that's of my twin grandbabies. When they were young, they would twin talk, and they were in their cribs having a giggle session. And so I had that on the video this morning. Yeah,
I love that.
Love my grandbabies.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and I do want to put this on the Scientology crimes. I'm having technical issues with uploading over there. So what we'll do, as we talked this morning on my channel, is we'll go ahead and I'll upload this over there and do a premiere. So that way I can be part of the chat on the Scientology crimes. And if you're not subbed to Scientology crimes, here's my shameless pitch for you to go and be a part of that. Having fun with that channel, and Mirriam's just been tremendous in helping me, and Carrie's got a video on there already too. So that's what we're talking about tonight, is the outcomes and what are we going to do with Scientology crimes. And sexual assault, and I use that as a general term because there's so much involved with it, is prevalent in Scientology. You have rape, molestation, exploitation, and the cover-up of all of those things. These crimes are happening to both adult women and men, and children, male and female. It can be traced back to the doctrine, the policy, and the practices that are acted out in auditing, ethics handling, and courses. I know that's a lot. We looked at the auditing and the bull baiting in the video with CarrieJ just the other day, and there was a direct correlation between just those two items and crimes, real life crimes, all of them you see on Law and Order. And the policy of cover up and not reporting to the authorities is another example. And so I wanted to open with those statements and say, do you guys have anything you would like to add to that to get us jumped off the cliff here?
I was just going to add on the earlier thing that you were saying, and sorry, I'm going to jump back there, but
Okay.
that one of the things that victims do have to contend with is this very long kind of runway to a result in the criminal, in pursuing a criminal outcome. And a lot of times people can be unprepared just because of the misinformation that's on TV. So that's one of the reasons why it's really great that we are doing this. There are several things along the way that a person has to understand. Like, for example, when you're talking about sexual assault, are you talking about historical sexual assault or recent sexual assault? Those two things, the evidence for the two things are going to be different. You're not going to have DNA evidence, and you're not going to have injuries if you're talking about a historical sexual assault case. So then, for example, what would be considered evidence for that? And LAPD has defined exactly a few of the things that they will use as evidence. One of the things is if it's happened to another person. So if there is a second victim, then that makes that case valid. But if it's only you and you're giving your police statement, this happened to me, this is, my statement, that's not enough for historical case. If you have a second victim, so for example, if we talk about the Danny Masterson case, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little bit off. I'm going down another route right now, but
It's all good,
with the
Mirriam,
Danny
it's all
Masterson
good.
case. Okay, Jane Doe 1 first filed a police report in 2004. Nothing was done until much later on. The other victims filed, I think it was 2016, in reporting to police, right? So when she put her statement in 2004, she didn't have any additional evidence in terms of what I'm aware of or what's publicly aware. For example, she did have a letter with her mother, but then her mother would have to substantiate that. Her mother would have to make a statement and say, yes, I knew, right? The mother wasn't willing to do that. So she was really in that on her own. And so that's not enough. But then once you have multiple victims, as soon as you have that second victim, then that's enough evidence for a case to go forward. So that's one type. Someone would have the other type of evidence in a historical sexual assault case for LAPD is that someone would have to have seen it happen. They can't just have known about it or you told them in terms of bringing a case forward. Now, that testimony can be included in the court, can be heard in the court, like we saw in the Danny Masterson case. But in terms of bringing a case forward, someone would have to have actually seen it. The other type of evidence that you could get is the person admitting to it, the perpetrator actually admitting to it. And then in that regard, we have things called pretext phone calls, which is a recorded phone call with the perpetrator. Or there's other evidence you can get because you can also record with someone who knew about it. That can also help you. But in terms of real evidence that's going to move the case forward, that's something that you may need to do. And so so just so people understand, like, it's not as simple as I go report to the police then does this then happens, like how we kind of see it playing out on the TV.
Right.
Sorry, I hope that's helpful.
No, that's extremely helpful because
Carrie's like,
99% of what we're doing.
you're on it, like a bonnet. Was she? How accurate were those statements, Carrie?
Well, I'm not as
lecture?
familiar, obviously, as she is with LAPD's standards.
Right.
But that, here in Pennsylvania, we had a pretty famous one called Bill Cosby, who
I'm just kidding.
who had been tried. He was tried the first time, and I think the jury was hung. And the trial judge had not let in, Mirriam, what you're referring to with other instances of the same conduct is called prior bad acts. In this retrial of Bill Cosby, the trial judge allowed the prior bad acts. So other victims, uncharged conduct for other victims that weren't part of the core case were allowed to come in, and that resulted in a conviction. But that can also be problematic, on appeal. So it's not ideal, but certainly, I can understand why LAPD would have certain types of standards. It makes sense because you have an ethical obligation to only arrest and prosecute someone that you feel you can prove their guilt, regardless of what a jury might do. You have to feel that. So that's part of the ethics of prosecution.
For example, absolutely. And the Danny Masterson case is a really good example of that. There were several victims, but they only charged on 3 counts. So 3 victims. They were successful on 2. They got the convictions on 2 of the counts. And they did in each trial, the first trial, which was declared a mistrial, and then the second trial. In both trials, they brought in a previous bad acts. The first one was Trisha Vesey, and then the second one was the woman from Canada. I thought both testimonies were just, incredible. They absolutely held weight. So you can have, so even though they had charged on 3 counts, they still also brought in a bad act, at least one bad act in each trial. And I think that does hold, that adds a lot of weight to the evidence for sure. Yeah. And like you said, in terms of the ethics, like they didn't charge on all of the victims, only presumably the ones that they felt they would be most successful on. And
Right.
they needed 2 counts. They needed 2 counts to be successful in order to put him away, in order to convict him, because of the statute of limitations, because it was happened 20 years ago, and it needed to be at least 2 counts of forcible rape in order to get that conviction.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, prosecutors, you're going to go in with your strongest case, and sometimes I'm sure the victims whose cases weren't charged probably maybe felt disappointed that they weren't part of that. But you really got to go in with your strongest. If you just throw as much as possible at a jury, it really kind of can dilute the power and the impact of the good evidence that you do have. So you really want to focus that jury on the best evidence that you have to get those convictions.
That is 100% true. Yeah.
Yeah, and for
you also
everybody
want
that's,
to.
I was just going to say,
Sorry.
those that are asking, if you don't mind, let me read you through some questions that we're going to get to as we're going through, so that way we're not just going to ignore you, and that way you have it ahead of time. Are there time constraints for prosecution? What is the best place to start for a person to file a complaint? The views on Scientology and LAPD, and is a class action or a group complaint or similar possible? So we will get to different topics on here. I promise we won't ignore you.
I
And
mean,
no
we could
fighting.
even take those questions up.
I said that in the chat.
Mono,
so.
I mean, it might be great to just maybe dive into answer those questions straight off the bat, because I think that does help. Or what do you think, if we just answer those questions now before we move into the next?
Sure, we can. Or, as I said, they'll kind of be answered as we go along.
Are you going to put up the whole
perfect. Okay.
PowerPoint thing?
Yes, we are, ma'am.
Okay. I love a PowerPoint. That's fun.
I know. I'm a PowerPoint and a spreadsheet girl, let me tell you.
But I think the other thing I just want to say is my non-legal, just real quick, is like the other thing that you have to factor in, and I know this is going through a lot of people's minds out there that are like keenly listening because they want to know, can I do this? The one thing you have to take into account is that part of going on this legal journey, that even if your case does make it to a court of law, right, which is a long shot in some cases, and it doesn't mean it won't because it happened a long time ago or something like that, right? But you have to take into account your mental capacity to be cross-examined on that stand, which is why most people, the percentage of men being assaulted is lower than women, but it still happens, and it's even higher non-reporting amongst men than it is amongst women in terms of sexual assault and molestation and everything else. That part of it, nobody prepares you for. They don't do that in the TV shows where they show the woman who's, gone through this as a child or as a youngster and is now finally getting their day in court to face their accuser, the accused, right? They're the accuser. That's part of it, is that you have to prepare yourself for a very long road, and then for also that it's not just a moment. You're not on the stand for 3 seconds. Like, that's the guy, like you're there for days answering questions about very personal things, which is why sometimes, like I said, people don't report. Go ahead, Mirriam. We're on a delay, Mirriam. Go ahead.
Thanks, Nora. I'm just going to disagree with you slightly on that.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, you and I have a delay. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to disagree on that, because this is a really, really, really important point. So I'm actually really glad that you raised that. Mm-hmm. You don't need to be thinking about, I'm going to be on the stand at the time when you're reporting. There are so many steps along the way before you ever stand on that stand. And I would encourage people, don't even think about that, because that could be 5 years from now. I mean, we're
Yeah.
always growing and we're getting more support, and our situations change, and you might be a freaking rock star in 5 years time. Like, you might be solid, but
And I
right
think
now,
the way I
today, when you're
worded it
I'm a
considering
was
rock
making a
star
report,
now.
wrong, because that's what I
yeah,
was
yeah,
trying
but
to say, is that
let
most
me,
people don't go because they think about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you're saying it much better
that's
than
what
I
I
did. But
don't want
I
them to
want to say
think
that we're
about.
agreeing. We're
Yeah.
actually agreeing. Is
Okay,
that, you know,
perfect.
yeah,
Okay, perfect.
people think I can't do that. I'm not. No one wants to hear my story. I'm not. It's not a big deal, and they shove it down. But like Mirriam's saying, by the time that comes around, you'll have support. There'll be other things, but it's an important part to remember
Yeah.
as a victim, as somebody who had this happen to you. Any part of that matters. It all matters. It's not somebody had it worse. Oh, Mirriam's story is so much worse than mine. I should just stop talking about Scientology altogether. Like,
Right.
we're all valid. Every single thing that happened to somebody is important and needs to have the light shown on it, you know, in the arena of justice
Yeah.
somehow.
Let me
And
just,
before we get into the facts part of it, I'd like to, if I could
all
throw
right,
my 2
perfect.
cents in there too, is that when, first of all, every case is going to be a case by case basis, and it's going to be set on its own values, on its own face values. And with, if everyone thinks, oh, I can't do this, or I won't be able to go to the stand, or my case won't be so valid, we as a community, we as people that have been violated, need to at least get the intakes done, because that's where it shows precedence and pattern, right? And when you show the precedence and pattern to either a law group, to a justice system, to the government, that's where you can show some change and make some change. So making sure that if you have to have maybe 2 people to do it, it's a history. If you're filing a civil case against Scientology, not necessarily against the perpetrator, but Scientology for covering it up, that shows precedence and pattern. So I think we need to take all of the information. Go ahead, Carrie. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to kind of merge what Mirriam and Nora were saying. And from what I've witnessed, I was not on the sex crimes unit, but my very good friend was the head of it. And, you know, yes, Nora's correct. There's a long road, and there's a lot to go through if you're going to make that decision to present your case to possibly be prosecuted. However, many DA's offices, even in smaller counties, have highly developed ways of handling, especially SA victims. And the victim witness advocates that they have in DA's offices. I mean, they are developed. They work as a team. And what I saw from my good friend, who was the head of the sex crimes and child abuse unit, she had her people prepared. And she had let them know what they were going to experience, both on direct, when they'd have to recount the minute details, and then also what to expect from cross. And that's what a good prosecutor does, is get that person ready. Yeah, I don't know that you can really 100% be ready, but we would have to prepare our victims for trial, whether it was a robbery, a shooting, or an SA case. So I'm just trying to kind of merge. Yes, there's a reason to be, cognizant of it, but there's really professional approach in the prosecutor's offices to help people. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And I just wanted to add, this is why I jumped at the opportunity there to talk about this, is because the thing that I want to repeat over and over and over is that it's all about the baby steps. It's all about the teeny tiny steps. I don't want anyone to be thinking about these huge long-term runway kind of ideas. I want you to think about the very next thing that is right in front of you. If the very first thing that you are looking at is writing that police report, I mean, man, you're going to be trembling. You are going to be scared, especially if it's a Scientology case or any kind of case where there's additional intimidation, not just being up against a perpetrator, but being up against an organization. I mean, being up against a perpetrator perpetrator alone is intimidating enough, right? It's terrifying. But that is the first thing. That's the first thing. And I don't want people thinking about these big hurdles. We have no idea where the case will go or how it will be. Like, for example, it could be effective in charging the person in support of another case, for example, with the same perpetrator, but it might not, but like we touched on before, like it might not be your case that gets charged. And there's all these different things that can happen. We just don't know. But I want people to think about the baby steps, because then, okay, so once you file that police report, that's not the end of what you need to do. You may need to consider, okay, so what is the next step? Do I need to get a statement from another person? Often the police will ask you, okay, are there any statements that you can get? Okay, now I got to work up the courage to maybe contact my mother because my mother knew, you know what I mean? Like, and that's maybe my next little step. Maybe I need to locate this person. Maybe I need to send this email out. Maybe it's at a point where I just need to follow up with the investigator. Okay, I'm going to set a reminder in my calendar every month or every 3 months, however often I'm willing to put, like, whatever energy I'm willing to put into this, I need to examine that, and I need to set like my follow up. So, for example, you might not want, like, let's say you have a young family, you don't want to be consumed with your criminal case, but you just want to like touch base every now and then and see how things are going and see what the next step is. You could set a reminder for yourself in your calendar. So I'm just trying to kind of like bring it down to like little tiny steps rather than these big things, and to make it less overwhelming. And I want people to only look at the next step that is right in front of you. And that's it. And do that step when you're ready to do the next step, like that.
Thank you for the reminder, Mirriam. You guys were ready to bring this wonderful PowerPoint up? Okay.
Sure.
Let me see if I can do it without totally screwing it up.
You got this. We believe in you.
PowerPoint away. And I've got the thing so that way I can change it over here on top of the chat. So I can't see a chat. I'm sorry. You guys are on your own. Be nice. Okay, so Carrie was gracious enough to make us a PowerPoint to start with. The statute of limitations for child sexual abuse cases, criminal and civil actions. And hopefully it's big enough people can see and you guys can read it on your end. Carrie, do you want to go through this parts of it?
Yeah, I think maybe it might be good to explain what the differences are between civil and criminal. So criminal is when the police are involved and the prosecutor is the one bringing the action. And in a California case, it's state of California versus. The state of California is the, plaintiff, for lack of a better word. And that's where you're talking jury trials with burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt, all those Law and Order shows that Nora is addicted to. That's criminal. Civil is when there is, the phrase is cause of action. There is a cause of action that arises from a person's conduct, okay, in this case, sex abuse. The law gives, in whatever state you're in, the law gives you a cause of action to pursue privately. So it's not the state of California, it's you, plaintiff. And you file a lawsuit against that person and say, hey, what you did is against the civil laws, and I'm going to hold you responsible. And the burden of proof in a civil action is it's either clear and convincing or preponderance of the evidence. Preponderance of the evidence is if you have two, get my hands in the shot here. If you have two versions of what happened, the plaintiffs and the defendants, preponderance of the evidence is we think the plaintiffs is just even slightly above the defendants. So that means plaintiff wins. So it's like a 51 to 49%. Clear and convincing is highly likely, substantial evidence, but it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So you have the benefit of a lower burden of proof in civil litigation. So just
So
to kind
Carrie,
of throw
real
that out
quick,
there. Yeah.
the criminal versus civil. Criminal, the penalties could be jail.
Mm-hmm.
Civil, you're not looking for a jail sentence. You're looking for
No.
restitution or an agreement or something to that nature.
Yeah, your damages in a civil case. Somebody doesn't get sent to jail because they get found liable in a civil case. They only get sent to jail if they're found guilty of a crime. But you're looking usually at monetary compensation, and that can take various forms, including actual out-of-pocket money. So if you had unreimbursed medical expenses for therapy, for doctors, you could get that reimbursed from the defendant. And you can also get punitive punishment damages. And that's where the big ticket items are that you see in headlines. $10 million punitive damages award. And it's designed to punish the defendant for having done what he did, usually monetarily.
Can you have
And let's
criminal
talk
and
about.
civil or both?
Yes, you can have both. Yep. The classic
Can I
case
just
is
add in there? Oh, sorry. I was just going to add in there. So recently, a lawsuit was brought against Jay-Z for sexual assault of a 13-year-old girl. And now in his statement that he put out, he said, well, if it was that heinous, then why didn't she file a criminal report with police? Why is she just going civil? And I think this is an easy way to to confuse people, like, oh, well, no, that must mean something. And it's like, no. And I just wanted to take a second to talk about and Carrie, you can also absolutely add to this, but reasons why someone would just pursue a civil, there are several reasons. I mean, one of the things you touched on there is the sort of the level of evidence that is required, or the weight of the case that it needs to bring. So in a civil, it's just if it's more likely than not. And then in a criminal, it has to be absolute, beyond a reasonable doubt. That could be one thing, but in terms of outcome as well, like you just touched on as well, if the person's not seeking a conviction, they might not be after that. Maybe they might be like, no, I want to restore my life. I want to look after myself. I need to remedy what happened to me, and a criminal outcome is not going to do that for me. So that's a big reason. The other reason is you can be more in control of your case and sort of lead where it's going to go. You might have more control over timelines. Like when it's a criminal case, it's just sitting with, well, first of all, there's a long runway to get to the DA's office, for example, before it's even charged, and you have no control over that except for what you're able to get as evidence to support your case. And there's the other thing is that there's differences in statute of limitations. And so there's lots of variations as to why you would choose one over the other, or you might want to do both. I recommend doing both, and I'm not a legal expert, I should say again. And I just think, if you're whatever you can do, but it really comes down to the person's personal preferences, and also whether or not you can get representation, because that's another difficulty, or if you have the finances to support your own case. So there's a few different variations with that. And I will say as well, in the Paul Haggis case, the plaintiff, that's another good example of where she only went with civil, did not file criminal, and she won that case.
Yeah, all of that's very true. You don't need a criminal case in order to pursue your civil cause of action. And I think control over the case, criminal, the victim does not have any control over what's going on. There are victims' rights acts in most, I would guess, every state in the union, but those aren't always followed. And in terms of notice and opportunity to be heard in terms of an outcome of a case. But yeah, when it's civil, it's, you get the protection of your lawyer. There are rules about contacting someone who is represented by an attorney. So you have that protection. And then you're in charge, 100% in charge of what you do with that case in terms of making, obviously the court's in charge, but how you want to represent, how you want the tone to be set. That's up to you.
And I would
And I
say
have to be
not
really
entirely up
honest.
to you because oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Can I just jump in there for 1 second? Sorry.
Yeah.
With a civil, it's not as easy as that because you are reliant on your lawyers and what they're willing to do. So it's not all 100% you. You get to make all the decisions. However, you do get a say in things. You can say no, I don't want to do that, or you get to offer up things like, and you get to be part of the process. Whereas with the criminal process, it's a very different situation. Now, I want to talk about there's two different things with regards to pursuing a civil because it's whether or not you are financing the case yourself, and if you are, absolutely, you're going to have way more say in it. However, if the attorney is doing it on a and I can't remember what the thing is called, but when
Contingency.
they only get paid.
Contingency.
Thank you. Contingency. They only get paid based on the outcome, like following the outcome. And so you're not having to pay any legal fees up front. Well, in that regard, you do have some say, absolutely, but you are going to be really reliant on the lawyer to make all those big decisions because they are the ones that ultimately, it's cost versus reward, and they need to figure out how they're going to run that case so that they can get payment at the end of it.
True,
At
but
the end of the day, they have to feed their kids too. Yes, and pay their
True, but
house payment.
there are certain things that a lawyer cannot decide, and it is the client's decision, like continuances or getting
Yeah.
up on the stand. Like those are things that there's, especially in civil, it's not wise for a lawyer to kind of be like, I'm in charge and this is what's going to happen. It's very much a collaborative process. You want your client to be on board with what you're doing, excuse me, and to agree with your strategy. If you don't have that, then you kind of really don't have a good attorney-client relationship, and it's probably not going to work out. But yes, you're right. The
That makes
lawyer
sense.
has a lot to say as well, but a good lawyer will be saying it in keeping in mind what their client wants.
That's a great point. Love that.
Thank you for defining that between the criminal and the civil, because honestly, and I know I'm not the only one here that thought this, is that I thought they had to have a criminal conviction in order then to go to civil. So learning something new every day, guys.
Yeah. No.
But
So Mona, I wanted to just mention on that point, that's a good point too, because that really depends on the lawyers. So when I have previously spoken to lawyers, they wanted me to have had a conviction. And I have only ever really focused on a conviction because that was the outcome that I wanted. So when we talk about what does the victim or the plaintiff want, what are they seeking? I was seeking a conviction, and I still am. And so that was where what was a priority for me. But again, back to the representation. So this is what I'm talking about, whether the lawyer is willing. First of all, you got to get a lawyer to take on your case. Like when we're talking about contingency, this is where it's more important. They have to decide, like, yeah, okay, we'll take that on, and that's going to be dependent on what sort of rewards could be the outcome. It could be how long do we expect this to go, because time is money, especially when you're talking about in the court. And so with a Scientology case, for example, they want it to be super, super, super solid because we know that Scientology will delay. That's their practice. It has to be a legal team that is specifically willing to take on Scientology and understand, what's going to be involved, and be willing to weigh that cost, because that cost will be on them when we're talking about contingency, to eventually get an outcome. And is that outcome going to be good enough? Yeah.
right. Thank you. Carrie, do you want to go
Okay,
further on
yeah.
this?
So if anybody wants to look it up, you can look up California Penal Code Section 799 through 805. These are the the statute of limitations for criminal actions in California. And let me see what I wrote here. For certain offenses, no statute of limitation for crimes on or after January 1, 2017, or if before that date, the statute of limitations had not run. So that's why they kind of had a step up approach, where, hey, if by this date your statute of limitations hasn't run, we're going to bump you up into a new category of statute of limitations that, it's for these offenses, there's no expiration date. So these are the offenses that are included in that under Section 799. Essentially, the various forms of rape, when somebody, they're rape by force, threat, fear of bodily injury, I think is an important one there. Intoxication, if they're unconscious, threat of retaliation. When I saw that kind of had my anti-Scientology antenna buzzing, because we know that that's a tactic that is sometimes employed. And threat of deportation was another one, especially with so many, they're trying to target, South American individuals now and bring them into the country. And, threat of deportation could be a real issue for them.
Would the aiding of another with forcible rape, the last one, is that just in the physical act, or is that in like any aspect of it, including cover up?
I have to remember whether it's the. I have to remember. I'd have to look. You know what, Nora? I'd have to look at the section because I have California and Florida kind of merging in my memory core right now.
I feel there's so many different laws in every different state here. It's not.
Yeah.
It's some are federal statutes, but we're talking specifically about.
There
California
is something in here in the slides about the cover up portion that I can't remember which state it is.
It's California. There is.
Okay.
We'll get to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I would just say off the cuff, Nora, and general disclaimer, even though I'm an attorney, nothing I'm saying here can constitute legal advice. If you need legal advice, please seek a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. Okay, so that being said, it could be something as simple as he gave her the Rohypnol, the roofie. He got it from his buddy, so now his buddy's aiding and abetting that. Like, hey, give her this, and then you can do what you want. I don't know if it means like, oh, hold her down,
right. No, I mean, because I don't know about every instance of abuse in Scientology, but the cover up aspect of it is enormous. And so I was just wondering if that bled into that particular aspect of it, because the threat of retaliation is one thing, but like those are actual acts that they do to aid this person who's committed the crime and also to prevent the victim from coming forward, kind of a thing. So it's kind of a dual thing, but I don't,
Yeah, that's a great point. Like somebody else could be making the threat, like, hey, you go against what so-and-so is saying, you're here on a visa, probably expired. You're going to get sent back. That could be deemed aiding and abetting, probably.
Right, because that's in the case of Danny Masterson, that's what happened to those women on repeated occasions inside of specifically the Celebrity Center, where they were made to, be interrogated and they weren't allowed to go to the police and things like that. Yeah. So and that was brought up during trial. That was how Scientology doctrine and scriptures, as they're liking to call this BS now, was actually admitted into evidence, which was the biggest thing that Scientology balked at, was like having any portion of Scientology admitted as evidence in a criminal case, which it did. I mean, obviously not all of it, but like that was what specifically like Claire Headley testified to in that case as an example.
Yeah.
As an example, the Jennifer Stewart Gorman case that Scientology Crimes just put up, she was told she had to live with her supervisor who raped her for over a year, more than 100 times. And she told the ethics officer, she told on them, and they continually made her stay with him, told her to shut up, and then told her dad if she told, she would be taken away from the dad because she was under 18 at the time. So but that case has already been settled. It wouldn't even be part of this, but that's a good example.
Yeah. That's really going to fit that cover-ups provision that we have yet to get to.
Yep.
So that's a really
Okay.
good, sorry, just touching on that, Mona,
Yeah.
that's a really good case to bring up because Jennifer Gorman, she did criminal first. She got the conviction of the perpetrator. In the
Absolutely.
meantime, she had the, I think it was soon after she filed the police report, she then got the civil case running. They kind of went side by side for a little bit, but he was convicted, and then I think a couple years later, I think it was 2005, that then they settled the civil. So the civil never actually went to court. I think that's a good example of doing both because you've got two aspects. The organization was heavily involved. There are police reports, several police reports that she made of the harassment and intimidation tactics that were used. And so she, clearly wanted to do both. She wanted to convict that perpetrator, and she also wanted to have some damages and some, restitution for the acts that the organization and its agents did.
Yep, exactly.
Well, I'm glad she got justice. Okay, just to round out this California criminal statute of limitations. So certain felonies, generally offenses punishable by 8 years or more, there's a 6 years. Certain felonies, if the victim was a minor, it's until the victim's 40th birthday. This only applies to crimes after January 1, 2015, or if, as of that date, the statute hadn't run. This is another step up, to expand the time frame. Otherwise, generally, it's 3 years. But there's so much to these statutes that filtering them down to little lines on a PowerPoint slide was kind of hard. So if people really want, I know it's dry reading, it can be difficult to read, but that's why I put the citations in there so that anybody who wants to can go through the California government website and look at the penal code themselves.
And we're basically giving guidelines. The best thing to do if you were in that situation that you were sexually assaulted, whether it was raped, molested, exploited, no matter what it was, or if it was, is to find representation or find somewhere to make the complaint and to do an intake. That's the best thing.
Yeah. And a lot of there are a lot of advocacy groups that will also help explain more in depth, so that if you don't want to pay a lawyer to explain it to you, you can go to these advocacy groups and they have a lot of knowledge about this, and they can help explain it if you're trying to understand whether you still have something viable. So that's another resource as well. So
I just wanted to add as well that the crime will be charged and then later, if that does occur, sentenced on the law that was applicable at the time that the offenses occurred. So you wouldn't be applying like today's law or sentencing to something that happened in 1990, for example. It would be the law that applied at that particular time. And so that's a really good thing to look at too, because that will set an expectation for the victim as well on potential outcomes. For example, a crime that was the law that was in place for a crime 20 years ago, the sentence may have been more lenient. And also even the terminology is different too. Like, so for example, the legal terms have changed. Like, so for example, molest isn't like, it's not a legal word. I believe it's either sexual battery, or there was with the recent changes, I think it's actually sexual assault. So we should look into that maybe another time to look at some of those definitions. But the actual definitions have changed recently with these new acts, California law, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are other things to consider as well, and have a look at and to set your expectations on as well.
Yeah. This policy -crime definitions, there was, when I Googled Florida criminal statute of limitations, sex abuse, I got directed to a PDF through RAIN, which is, I forget what it stands for. It's rape. I forget what the A is, incest.
Incest, yeah. Yeah.
It's
So RAIN is the largest sexual assault helpline in the US. And that we should pop that up too, because they have a website. You can do an online chat with them if you just want to, ask some questions. There's also the phone line as well. And they are really trauma informed, a really good organization, because the other thing they do is there's so much information on there. They collect statistics. So that's a really good resource.
I'll make
Yeah.
sure and link it in the description panel.
Yeah, and their
Yeah,
PDF
it's RAINN. Yeah.
I just put it in the chat. It's RAINN.org.
Thank you.
Go there. They have a live chat. They have pretty much everything that you can find out.
That's an example, like what I was just saying, these support groups, these advocacy groups have a lot of legal knowledge that, if you don't want to go to a lawyer, you can go to one of these groups like RAIN. They're nationwide in the United States, and they will be able to find out for you, if we don't cover it today, like, hey, I'm talking about Kansas, something happened in Kansas City, org. What am I looking at? They can help you with that information. So, so they changed the law recently.
So, Carrie, sorry, just before you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry that I'm interrupting you, but just before we continue on. So the one, for example, in Australia is 1-800-RESPECT. They deal with domestic abuse and also, family violence and also sexual assault. So that's for Australia. That's a really good one. But there should be one in pretty much every country, a national
the national
that's available.
Hotline in America is 800-656-HOPE, which I put in the chat also.
Yeah.
That's the national 24/7 sexual assault hotline here in America.
And that's for RAIN. And I just wanted to mention as well, like to give you a real life example, we heard this in the last trial, the second trial of Danny Masterson, but Jane Doe 3 actually had contacted RAIN because she had discussed with the organization. She'd gone to see the chaplain. So when Danny Masterson raped her, she went to see the chaplain. She went to Scientology. She went to Celebrity Center, and she said, "This happened to me. Like, you need to do something about it. This is not okay." And when she'd said that to Danny Masterson, he just chuckled and laughed it off. And when she went to the organization, in fact, they didn't do anything about it. That was quite shocking for her, and that's what led her to later on. Then one of the turning points was because they kept saying to her, like the chaplain said to her, "Oh no, that's not rape. You couldn't have been raped because he's your boyfriend, like he's your partner, so that's not rape." She had been given all this misinformation by Scientology and had that completely inverted to where she was supposed to believe that she caused it. So some years later, she actually reached out to RAIN and they said, "That's rape." So that's how important, and then that led her to reporting it. So that's how important, especially when you have these really closed off groups, like in high control groups, in cults, and can be across many organizations where the information's controlled and manipulated. That's why these organizations are so essential. And
looking at it with a fresh view and fresh eyes, right?
Yeah, because, to even not fully understand, she knew that what had happened to her was wrong and should never have happened. Instinctually, she knew that. But the people who were telling her, "No, that can't be it. That can't be it." She needed an outside kind of, authoritative or informed kind of representative that could say "No, that this is what it is. These are the terms. This is what happened to you. These are the words." Do you know what I mean? Because that's the other thing with Scientologists is a really good point, is that the language is very inverted. Something that, it should be called rape, they then call it out 2D and they reframe it. Well, out 2D is something that you did wrong. So there's all this minimization through the language. So again, that's why these sorts of networks are really, really important.
Right.
Okay, so Florida changed the law as of July 1, 2020 for any minor, where the offense happens on or after July 1st, 2020. There is no statute of limitations, period. And I gave some of the citations. I pulled this directly from the PDF that RAIN had at that at that link. So there's that. And then if we
And
go,
I did find for Florida that you've got it on there. I'll let you continue. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. For crimes prior to July 1, 2020, in Florida. So this is kind of a laundry list. I don't want to just have to go through and read everything. But you can see life felony if the offender commits sexual battery on a victim at least 12, uses force, deadly weapon, things like that. Felony of first degree must be within 4 years. For any other felony, must be 3 years. There's no time limitation for any sexual battery violation committed against a victim under 16 at the time of the act. There's no time limitation for any first degree sexual battery offense committed against a victim under 18.
Sorry, that was under 18. Oh, was it under 16 earlier?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'm just seeing under 18 there.
That's because Florida is a unique unicorn. They have different rules for different ages, which is really frustrating. They don't, because their age of consent in some counties is like 17. And so you have to be really, in some states it's also that too. So you just, there's one that says under 18 and then the next one says under 16.
For different violations. So sexual battery, victim under 16, there's no time limitation. First degree sexual battery against a victim under 18. So that's where the what the crime is dictating whether the statute of limitations applies or doesn't. And let's see, there's no time limitation if the offense is a first or second degree felony committed against a victim 16 or older, and the offense is reported within 72 hours after its commission. So this is touching on what's called a prompt complaint rule. I'm familiar with this in Pennsylvania as a rule of evidence that allows, if a victim makes a prompt complaint, they're allowed to bring that evidence in to kind of bolster the credibility of the victim during the trial. And here Florida's making prompt complaint a prerequisite to getting this, exception to the statute of limitations where you don't have any statute of limitations. 72 hours is 3 days. I mean, that's not a ton of time. So I wasn't real excited as a lawyer reading that. I thought 72 hours was way too short with what we know about how people respond to going through that. So
like never mind your trauma. You gotta just, as soon as it happens, just run into the police station, which is like, when is that happening? I mean,
right.
Most people don't even tell, especially a teen. Most teens don't even tell their parents in a non-cult situation that something like that happened for years. And now we're expecting a teen to just, in 72 hours, go report this to police, which is
because that's the rules.
Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, that's the rules. So, and it's good to know. It's good to know if you're a parent of a teen and this happened to them, it's good to know that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Nora. And a really good point as well to make here is that most of the time, in most cases, the perpetrator is usually known to the victim. In other words, we're not talking about stranger rape or stranger sexual assault. In most cases, it's somebody that is already known to the victim. So added to that weight is all these considerations that we have as humans of, it could be fear, like intimidation, could be, what will happen to the family? How will this change? Like, so for example, we could even bring up the Menendez brothers. They didn't talk about the sexual assaults that they had experienced because they didn't want to shame the family. And it was really, really difficult for them to then do so on the stand for that reason. And there was also intimidation and threats as well included too. So that is a huge factor. Like Carrie, when you say you're disappointed about the 72-hour rule, like I absolutely get it, because we know that there are so many factors as to why a person wouldn't go and report it straight away.
Yeah.
And those are crimes that are reported before 2020, because after that, there's no
Right.
statute of limitations.
Right. This is for,
Right.
as you mentioned, Miriam, historical cases.
Okay.
And the last, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. I was just
Okay.
being,
All right, so now California. So as a general rule, when you sue somebody hits you and they knock out a few teeth and you sue them because you have to have implants now, you have 2 years. However, for child SA, so if you go to the California Code, the Code of Civil Procedure number 340.1, this is the one, I think it's been in the news this past year. So as of January 1st of 2024, there's basically, I think maybe I forget to put it on there, there's no statute of limitations for that. And this is where we get to the cover up part. So this is about if it's a person or an entity who owed a duty of care to a plaintiff and acted negligently or wrongfully towards that plaintiff. It also includes if the entity acted intentionally. So, Mirriam, some of the examples that you gave us from prior cases where, the victim, I think the Jennifer Gorman case, you said she went to the chaplain, and the chaplain basically was like, "Oh no, you weren't raped. That's not what rape is." That person,
That was
if
Jane Doe
they're
3 in the Danny Masterson case.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. If that,
Yeah.
by virtue of his role, may be deemed to have a duty of care to someone coming to him for, consult as a per their religion, quote unquote religion.
100%.
Yeah, that could be what pulls them in as an entity.
So this is a really great point, Carrie, because so the chaplain, let's just pause for a second just to define that, because the chaplain, and I'm sure Mona, you've seen this so far covering these cases, the chaplain keeps coming up again and again and again throughout these cases of sexual assault within Scientology. And it also was very obviously, prevalent in the Jane Doe's cases as well. Jane Doe 2, for example, was actually, her dealing with chaplain was in regards to a previous rape by a different perpetrator. She and he had gone to the chaplain to have the matter resolved. And then she was dissuaded from reporting, and it was treated almost like we got to resolve the relationship or end the relationship or whatever, which is what tends to happen. So the role of the chaplain in Scientology, as people understand it, is that is the place that you go to resolve family matters or like upsets. So when you have an issue or disagreement with another person, and basically a basis for a civil suit or a criminal suit, basically, a criminal case, could be the thing that you have what they call a disagreement, or, this person is disaffected with that person. It's like, maybe because that person caused injury to the other person, for example. But the chaplain is the place that you go to resolve those issues. And then, but actually, as we understand it now from information that has come out more recently, is that the chaplain has a direct line with the Office of Special Affairs.
Correct.
The Office of Special Affairs, OSA, is charged with covering up sexual assault crimes, any crimes, basically, any crimes.
Yeah.
And their purpose
Any
is to
legal
prevent
threat
things
to
from
Scientology.
going. Legal or PR is basically their sort of wheelhouse. So it's to prevent any bad PR and to prevent anything going into the civil or criminal. And their actual statistics are based on this as well. And Nora has done some fantastic deep dives into OSA, recommend. And so this line that's directly with the chaplain, whereas, so for the public on the outside, their impression of what the chaplain's role is actually different from actually what it's designed to do. So for example, and that's where we see that these cases get treated as something as they're not. The chaplain will, like by design, the chaplain is there to, to steer you away from these actions, to give you misinformation, to misrepresent things to you, to manipulate you. So yeah, it's a very important role to look at in terms of when we're talking about cover up in Scientology.
There's two roles in the cover up that we see. One is the chaplain and a DSA. Nora, what's a DSA?
It's a director of special affairs. That's the OSA representative that is placed in every single Church of Scientology, whether they are a Sea organization or, the Sea Org organization, or a public, non-Sea Org organization. Like the org here in Portland is a non-Sea Org organization, but the one that people see protesting around all the time, all of those blue buildings are staffed solely by Sea Org members. But the director of special affairs, oftentimes in even some of those non-Sea Org orgs, ends up being a Sea Org member, just as like the L. Ron Hubbard communicator is, and things like that, because the network is so clandestine, and so needing to be like vetted and secure, as they like to put it. So they only trust very few people with that particular position. And they have to be, of course, the most fervent, the most zealot Scientologists on the planet, because they are covering up actual crimes, as was done in the Jane Doe's case, in Jennifer's case, and Mirriam's case, and, ad infinitum at this point, with all of the different types of crimes they've covered up, not just sexual assault, but like look at Rosemary Brown as an example of the identity theft and credit card fraud that was committed on her. The Office of Special Affairs completely covered that up 100%. So it's the same, but they have representatives everywhere. They have eyes and ears at every single org. And like, for example, when the Jane Does went to the chaplain, Celebrity Center is a little bit unique because there's another person in the like line of succession where you would report this. But the chaplain in that case, because it involved a celebrity at Celebrity Center, would go directly to the president's office. The president's office is another basically like OSA front. Essentially, it's a complete OSA front because it's all about the PR of Scientology, and anything that goes on about celebrities in particular is directly reported not to Celebrity Center's internal director of special affairs, which they had. It's reported directly to OSA International and to the Religious Technology Center, because Celebrity Center and the president's office in particular is like its own special elevated unit within Scientology. So like those cases in particular, especially the Jane Does, were being dealt with by the senior executives of Scientology. Like there's nobody in between Dave Pettit, who's the commanding officer, and Maria, who's the president, between David Miscavige, who didn't know what was going on in those crimes, didn't have a hand in covering it up, right? So from David Miscavige on down, that's how it happens. But like, as far as I know, like somebody asked in the chat, and in California, let me just see something, because people are asking like, aren't ministers mandated reporters, right? So the chaplain is supposed to be a Scientology minister. He's for the job, you're supposed to be an ordained Scientology minister, which means you can perform marriages, you can perform all of the like little rites and stuff that then fall under the guise of religion, right? And in California, ministers are mandated reporters. So this is like even worse, where a minister of a church is getting like told a crime, and instead of doing what a mandated reporter is commanded to do in that instance, okay, and tell, like, minister this person into filing the appropriate police report, et cetera, they do the opposite in Scientology. It starts the wheels rolling of how do we make this go away, and also using Scientology to completely obliterate the victim's mind, as Mary mentioned earlier, and to darvo you into thinking that you, the victim, made all of this happen.
Right, correct.
Right. So it's really in Scientology, in that case, it's very similar to very sheltered Christian sects, where they have like a same type of thing. Like if you are a woman and something happens to you sexually, you're a sinner, you're Jezebel, you're like all these things, and all these things get put on you. In this case, Scientology uses the term PTS, which stands for potential trouble source. And so anything that happens to you is because you pulled that like a magnet toward yourself, right? But then they go further than that and convince you how you actually caused that to occur. So it really does, no matter what the crime is that's being committed on you, it makes it worse because there is no safe place to go to inside of Scientology to say, hey, I need some help. Because the second you say that, it's going to start the ball rolling, no matter what, going to OSA for sure, about you're now the problem if you're saying something happened to me. So
But can I just ask the two survivors a question? I think I know the answer to this, but for the sake of having everything together in one place, are there policy letters from LRH, LRH?
I just call them Lafayette. It makes my life easier, but yeah.
Are there policy letters? Or is this in some sort of, written form about, Mirriam, you said you're supposed to go to the chaplain if you're having a disagreement with a person. Is that written somewhere? Like, as a lawyer, that's what I'm looking for.
That's in What is Scientology. They do that in the film. What is Scientology? The orientation film. It's also in the book, What is Scientology? They very specifically state in the film, now let's go to the office of the chaplain. If you have a conflict or an upset with another Scientologist, here's who you'll talk to. And then they have the very nice old guy like, I'm the chaplain. You can come talk to me about anything. And I'm here to listen and sort it out. I do marriage counseling, and they make it seem very, very genuine, very earnest, very like, oh, this is where you go if you like feel like things are shit doodles. I'm going to go talk to the chaplain, just like you would at any other church where you're like, oh, I'm going to go talk to my minister and see if he has some advice, to get some sage advice. It's also one of the few places in Scientology, unless you're getting like marriage counseling, which is normally delivered by the chaplain, where you can get free things. Like you can watch and see that it doesn't cost you money to go talk to the chaplain about anything. But it is definitely just eyes and ears for OSA. It's not real. It's not a real
lawyer thing. If I'm looking to establish that chaplain owes a duty of care to my plaintiff, my client, that's what I want to see. I want to see those policy letters. I want to see those examples in a book or in a movie saying, this is my responsibility to you, practitioner of Scientology. That's where you prove a duty of care that then was violated.
Well, it's also in volume 6 of the organization executive course. There's an entire section about the chaplain because that's part of his job. I don't have all those policies memorized, but those would be the places as a lawyer, if you're looking like, what was this chaplain supposed to do?
Right.
Even per Lafayette. And then what actually happens are two different things, because, oftentimes it's just a front. I mean, Shane Woodruff is probably still the chaplain at Celebrity Center. He was the chaplain who, went to Leah Remini's house and personally tried to handle her when she was having disagreements and upsets about Scientology. But he's the same person who all the Jane Does had to go see first before they were even seen by the president's office to like raise these concerns about Danny Masterson. So it's a whole thing. And in every organization, there'll be an individual, if they have enough staff, who's posted as just the chaplain. Sometimes that is like a job that like one person has that they also have like 6 other functions because they don't have enough staff, but somebody will be doing those functions for sure.
Good. Are you ready for me to switch?
Add in, I just wanted to jump in there and add in, okay, so there's internal documents and then there's external documents, as in what's available to the public. And that creates their impression of what these agents in the organization is supposed to do and the roles, defining the roles and that sort of thing. And then there's internal documents and directives and that sort of thing, which would tell a different story. And so that's one thing to understand, but certainly that's a really great point, Carrie and Nora, about the defining the role of the chaplain and what people believe. Yes, that is publicly available documentation, policies on the green on white. So those are policy letters by Hubbard and how it was designed. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Okay, so there's actually several roles and agents who are involved in like steering these issues, like steering, the cover up of a crime or the preventing things from going to civil. And so those are the other one there. A really important one to mention is the ethics officer. So we've got the chaplain, huge role. The ethics officer is another one. The ethics officer, a big part of, and Nora touched on some of the things there, but a big part of what the ethics officer will do is they are there to like recondition the person to get everything reframed and to subvert everything. So one of the things that was mentioned in the trial with Danny Masterson, the last trial, was this overt motivator sequence. So Nora touched on there the PTS, supposed technology. But there's also the overt motivator sequence. So this belief that if something happened to you, you must have committed something bad against them prior to that to then create this motivator sequence, basically. So that's something that was mentioned in the trial. That comes through, that's done in like the ethics office, where they're getting you to do conditions, which are reconditioning, how you feel about it or how you frame things. And so that was particularly with Jane Doe 1, that was that was a big part of her experiences in doing this one-on-one with Julian Swartz, who was the ethics officer at AOLA. Okay, so the other ones to look out for in these cases. So again, chaplain has been repeatedly mentioned across cases. Ethics officer has been mentioned at times as well, particularly Julian Swartz. But also we want to look at the lawyers as well for Scientology. So the Scientology lawyers have involvement, and the other role that we mentioned before is the DSAs, the Director of Special Affairs. And those are the main ones to look out for that have had involvement. The other one is representatives of CCHR. CCHR is basically like a front group for the Office of Special Affairs. They're basically like the public arm of OSA. So when you see a CCHR agent involved in a case, like for example with the Carmen Rader case, we had Jan Eastgate, we'll just know that that's connected to OSA. And the thing to understand there is that you have OSA International, which is at that international worldwide level. And that's really where that power is held. Obviously, it's held above that by David Miscavige. But what I'm trying to get you to understand is that all these things trickle down. There's a command line that in this OSA network structure, and the orders trickle down. They get sent down the line. Information, reports, and compliance go back up the line, and there is a very clear channel of command there. So you will see certain agents involved out in the field, but just know that that's ultimately being channeled through this Office of Special Affairs International Network.
Right.
Okay.
I'm going to click through, Carrie, to the next one.
Okay. Okay. For actions arising before that wonderful new law, January 1, 2024, plaintiffs have until they're 40 or within 5 years of discovering, or where they should have discovered, a psychological injury is the result of a child SA. So this is, the last one was Rule 340.1. This is 340.11. The same cover-up and entity liability applies as we just discussed. And they actually use the term cover-up in these rules. That wasn't me putting them in quotes. That came from the rule. So again, this is where I think the whole idea of making an abuser going to counseling is not enough. So if you owe someone a duty and you do nothing, you don't get protection from an over 40 plaintiff. So let me pull that statute back up because it's
I've got it. I've got it next.
Using, yeah. I just want to see.
Oh, I had Mirriam's points first.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah. Okay. Okay, so they're talking about shall not be commenced on or after the plaintiff's 40th birthday unless the person or entity knew or had reason to know of any misconduct that creates a risk of childhood sexual assault by an employee, volunteer, representative, or agent, or the person or entity failed to take reasonable steps or to implement safeguards to avoid acts of childhood sexual assault. So this is in paragraph C of Rule 340.11. So it kind of looks to me, and again, I'm not a California lawyer, so I'm just going off of what I'm reading here. It kind of looks to me like a way around that 40th birthday cutoff.
Correct.
Is if a person or entity knew or had reason to know of misconduct and they did nothing. And sending the offender to counseling or ethics or whatever, Scientology equivalent might be, is not enough. So this is a real, oh, you added that. Okay. I'm sorry. I was reading it from my webpage. This has some real teeth, I think, the potential for some real teeth here, especially with the organization, because this is getting people out of otherwise being limited to that 40-year-old birthday party cutoff date.
Correct. And
So
then
Yeah, because everybody who's an offender at one point is sent to ethics to either manually write up their transgressions, what's called overts and withholds in Scientology, or they are put into a formal counseling session known as auditing in Scientology, where they are given a confessional type, and they're called confessionals. There are different types of confessionals that you can get in Scientology, where they are like, the e-meter is used, another person's basically interrogating them, sometimes from a prepared list, that Lafayette wrote, or they can get a customized list written especially for the crimes that they did by the case supervisor and in conjunction with the ethics officer and the chaplain to really make sure that we get not just the crimes that they're being currently accused of, but we roll it back all the way as many times as they've ever done it, all the way back through previous lifetimes. Okay. So this is very, very thorough in that, like, let's say, in the case of like Danny Masterson, when he was accused by multiple women, I'm sure I would bet my life on the fact that he was engaged in Scientological confessionals for many, many hundreds of hours, in which he probably confessed various other things that were not brought to court, right? Because that's how this works. And then they put that in their little folder. They record the sessions, they audio and visual record all of that stuff, and it's all written down. It's not, you have to be very specific when you're an auditor in what you write down. It's like being a court stenographer. Okay. Like you're trying to write as fast as you can every single sordid detail that the person's telling you about these crimes. Right. So it's the cover up of this cannot be understated in the fact where you when you're confessing something, especially of a sexual nature in Scientology, when they say they want the who, what, when, where, how, they literally want like a moment by moment description of every sense that you experienced during that transgression, right? And so it would be the most detailed confession you probably would have ever seen as a lawyer if you read one of these sessions where they talked about, having done this thing to this person. So and then they just sort of file it away. Well, you told us on the meter and your needle did the floaty float. So all good. Check that off the box now. And meanwhile, the person who it happened to also has to get a similar confession done on them where they find out what crimes they did to make that crime happen to them. So it's like a double whammy for the victim, because it's never just like, oh, well, they fixed it with auditing, so now we're all good because they're better. Like, no, now you have to go down the same kind of trail of tears.
And I think that's not going to fly, with that special statement in there that making somebody go to counseling isn't enough. I think there's
That's
enough
wonderful.
parallels. Yeah.
Yeah, Nora, you reminded me of something that I think it's good to make to make this known as well, is that in Jane Doe 1's case, so her mother wrote a letter to David Miscavige. I believe this was back in 2004, because she was like, this is not being handled the way that it should be. There are suppressive people here, and she detailed out some actions that had occurred. And one of the things that she described in detail, which was taken from the notes, directly from the notes of this report, was that there was a metered, I believe it was like a metered ethics interview done on Danny Masterson. And what was his friend's name, Nora, do you remember?
Are we talking about Luke Watson?
The son of the Luke Watson. So as I understand it, the metered ethics interview was done on both of them. But in like, let's take Danny's. She detailed about both of them. This is so wild. Okay, this is why I wanted to mention it. Detailed in Danny's reports is basically he is describing like almost, it's so alike Jane Doe 1's description of events. The only thing that's missing is the admission of wrongdoing. So he describes the events the same, as in, the violence, the violent acts that were involved. The description of the event is the same, but does not take any ownership for any wrongdoing. And in fact, he described it as a, just a wild sexual event. Which in fact, obviously it was rape. And what had happened, this is why I wanted to mention this, is because the officials that were involved at the time were saying to Jane Doe 1, oh, well, he just doesn't see it as rape. So until he comes up to the level of being able to see it as rape, like, we're not going to enforce your point of view onto him, basically, which is so crazy. That's how crazy
Carrie's going to pass
Scientology is. I know. So I'm telling you, if you read this letter, that would be a really great one to do on the Crimes channel, Mona. To do Jane Doe 1's mother's letter is so eye-opening. Yeah, and the fact that Danny Masterson, well, he just can't see it as that. So that's the wildness.
So letting the rapist define rape. That's
correct.
That's what Scientology.
Well, because in Scientology, if you're somewhere on, and we're getting so technical, but this is like why it's so hard for Scientologists and ex-Scientologists to get any form of justice, right? So Lafayette lays out the state of being of a spirit. In Scientology, it's called a thetan, and that is on the tone scale, right? And so that goes from positive 40 all the way down to negative 40, and there's like many tones in between, okay? And so if you're very low on that scale, your quote confront of reality and confront of evil is very low. So you're not able to like even see it. You can't see it. You don't know it. You can't have it in your presence, right? So basically what they were saying to the Jane Does at that time, right? So it's like translate the Scientologies here, is that Danny was so low on the tone scale because of these horrific acts, and he was such a bad person that he's not able to even know that what he did is rape. So we have to wait until we give him more Scientology, okay, to bring him up this scale. So then he can be like, oh my God, guys, you know what I did? I did rape. And then maybe we'll talk about, some, something. But by that time, I mean, like literally, if you just keep going on the bridge, you're going to be fine too. I mean, everybody just go up the bridge, and then that's always the solution. But like in the case of a celebrity like Danny Masterson, they don't even have to take responsibility because they're unable to, right? Because you just use one policy to justify the fact that this person can't see that it's rape, and then the victim again is wrong. That is how the Scientology logic works. And it is really, really hard. I mean, it's a miracle, honestly, that like any one of us who's left Scientology has been able to like walk and chew gum at the same time and like operate in the real world, because you have to deconstruct so much stuff on a daily basis to just like get your mind. But especially when you're a victim of a horrific crime inside Scientology, that type of circular kind of, it's not even circular, it's more like a whirlpool logic, because it just pulls you further and further down. It's not even just a circle. You know what I mean?
And
so it's
like
it's really destructive.
Nora, you hit like that on the head completely, because here's a really good thing to raise is like, let's talk about predator and prey for a sec, because the real, obviously Danny Masterson, predator, that's clear, but there's this huge like lurking predator that is looking to take any advantage that they can. And they saw an opportunity in Danny Masterson because he was pretty much stalled on the bridge. He was not moving up these Scientology levels. I think he stopped at like level 2, which is really low level comparatively. And so they saw this as an opportunity. Oh, well, we just got to keep getting Danny Masterson, keep him paying for these services. With Jane Doe 1, she paid, like they made money. They made money off of the rape that she experienced because they made her pay for all these sessions of, I think it went on for at least 3 months, of doing the sessions, and some of it was sex checking. I think there was a whole bunch of things. They were making her go past life and try and find a time when she raped somebody else in a previous lifetime.
Correct.
Like, this is the craziness. This is the corruption of this mass predator that is almost like this silent, unseen predator, but that is doing all these things with their various agents, with their various, things. So yeah, it's really, wow. So for Jane Doe 1, like as an example, just in her case, imagine how overwhelming that is when everyone around you is gaslighting you. In fact, even her mother, who at the time in 2004, let's go back to 2004, she wrote that letter to David Miscavige. She was advocating for her daughter. But then we fast forward to the time of the trial. She's nowhere to be seen. She's gonna, there's another case coming up and we're going to see more of her, but she was not willing to separate, from Scientology. In order to really stand up for her daughter, she would have to say that Scientology had done wrong. She couldn't do that. She's chosen.
She would lose her Scientological future. She would have to leave the church formally in that sense.
Wow. So then, as you can see, Mirriam, can I pause just for a second? Carrie, are we doing okay on time? Are you doing okay?
I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm fine. Keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. So you can see that all these people around Jane Doe, we had the ethics officer, Julian Swartz, who was trying to convince her, you did something wrong in order to make this happen. Her own auditor is like making her go fucking create these, I call them false memories, but, I guess anyone can make up their own mind of what they are. Create these false memories of where, like, she was the rapist. And and this went on for months and months and months and months. But, she spent a ton of money. And, like, you're talking about, like, this deliberate machine trying to destroy a victim of a crime for profit.
Let's just pause and replace in that scenario, Mirriam, where you talk about how they were profiting from the report. Let's replace Scientology with the Roman Catholic Church.
Correct.
What would have happened in this country if, when that scandal broke and everything came to light, people also found out that the Roman Catholic Church was charging people who were reporting that their children had been molested? I mean, Scientology's
I didn't know
over
that.
Here. Everyone knows Roman Catholic Church is very, very mainstream. What would have gone on in this country if people had found out?
Oh, people would have, it would have been absolute chaos. I mean, like, I don't advocate for burning of any religious structure, but let's face it, people would have, let's put it this way, people would have cheered when Notre Dame burned. Okay. And that's one of the most historical places on the planet. Yeah, no, it would have, it would have been absolute chaos.
Right. And that's why, I mean, that's such an important point that not only was this person victimized by Danny Masterson, they were then victimized by their quote unquote church that has 501c3 status.
Correct.
Supposed to be doing public good.
Which, and that's, I want to remind people that when we're looking at this and with the statute of limitations and the civil filings, you're not just looking at the perpetrator for civil filings. I personally am looking at this as research and investigation of going after the Church of Scientology as further perpetrators and cover-ups. So when you're thinking of, oh, does this fit me? Oh, I may not be able to go after John Smith that raped me when I was 12. Think of it, well, you may be able to go after the Church of Scientology that covered the frickin' thing up. So there's two avenues that we're working here.
Yeah.
Totally. That's why I said, it's not a bad idea to like pursue both if you can. Would be
Yep.
great because the outcomes, there's so many variations between the two. So I'm glad that we like covered, like broke those kind of things down. Yeah. So it is interesting. I mean, Catholic Church is another story, but they have done some horrific things. Like, for example, in Australia, in terms of the cover up, like we know they moved the priests around. Okay, that's a known item, right? But what isn't so known is that there was actually this board that was created to, like receive the complaints of victims. And in actual fact, what it was doing, kind of in a almost like kind of adjacent to Scientology as well, is that they were manipulating the outcomes. For example, the psychologist who was examining the victim was also a psychologist who was examining the perpetrator. That psychologist would then go and give evidence in court as, so it was very extremely corrupt. And the parents and the victims were, having to spend all this time. So when you mention about being further victimized, I don't want to exclude the Catholic Church from that because they have their own horrors of what they've done to victims beyond the actual crime and even beyond the cover-up of the crime, but in the legal sense, delaying these outcomes for child victims, their families, to get restitution, to recover, to remedy. And there's been so many suicides. Just this process that they've made extremely difficult. It is better now. But I just wanted to just sort of add this. The horror of it is absolutely not limited to Scientology. Scientology is a very extreme version, but the Catholic
Agreed.
Church certainly is also another extreme version of the way they've dealt with victims and their families.
Agreed. Thank you, Mirriam, for that reminder. Do we want to go through what you had put in your post about your points? Because I'd like to see the different views on these statutes. It's helpful. They're all kind of the same, but it's just a different flavor.
I just wanted to add as well, Mona, onto what I just said, because I felt like that, that's, what I want to say is that things have improved. Things are getting better. The Los Angeles Archdiocese for the Catholic Church has just recently announced a huge, I think it was, we got to Google the number because I keep forgetting, but it was like, it was a significant amount of money that was being paid out for these recent claims because so every time you have one of these statute of limitation laws change, you usually will have a look back window. So the law will provide a certain period of time in which previous claims that were excluded from the previous statute of limitations could then come forward and bring their claim. And there was hundreds and hundreds of claims within the state of California during the look back windows. There was a couple of look back windows, and there's variations, and that's a whole other thing. But and then we had basically one Scientology case. But back to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, we're seeing huge amount of claims being rewarded for now. There is a difference in some regards, and then you can see Scientology is way, way, way behind the mark here. Now, I just wanted to mention as well how we kind of got to the conversation of statute of limitations is, or I guess one of the things that kind of kicked off this conversation was Mike Rinder did a video with John Atack in which Mike Rinder said, well, if I was concerned about covering up or, litigation about cover up of Scientology crimes, then why would I be a representative of Child USA who's involved with creating these new laws and these new look back windows and changing the statute of limitations. So he really took credit for the changes of the statute of limitations. And he was sort of like, he posed that as like, why would I do that? And then John Atack was like, oh yes, well, you must be, whatever word he used, like that would mean that you would be crazy if you were assisting in opening up these statute of limitations, and yet you were the one that was involved in the cover up, as if to say like, oh, that proves his innocence.
I mean,
right,
like,
so
it's
then
always
Nora,
the priest, it's always the lawmaker who's spouting against these things that is the one doing it. So like,
100%. So the point is that it's, it's not that crazy if he doesn't tell anybody about it. The cohort of, ex Scientology, mainly kids, mainly children who had horrific crimes committed against them, who never had any advocacy, never got a fucking education, never, never had anyone standing up for them, no one to go to, being tricked, lied to, all the rest of it, being intimidated, harassed, all the rest of it, victimized and re-victimized over and over and over. And Mike Rinder sat there knowing that these people who used to be children are largely still uneducated, are largely still uninformed, are largely still under psychological pressures and pressures of, they'll lose things, they'll lose relatives or whatever. They will be further damaged if they come forward with a crime. He understands all those things in place and then takes credit and laughs about these things, which in fact, you never fucking told anybody. So why didn't you tell anybody? If you're saying you want to take credit for opening up these statute of limitations, and then that is somehow that protects you from anyone looking at you like you're a criminal, which you are, you can't be one or the other. If you never tell anyone about it and you keep that quiet, you keep that information quiet, then yeah, it's an issue. It's a major issue. And that sort of kicked off this whole conversation about these things.
It did. And it happened to be a conversation that we had on my channel. And one of my viewers, he doesn't want me to name his name, decided, he does a lot of research for me in legislative and bills, and said, hey, this has changed. And it shocked me. At first I went, nah, it couldn't have changed. But reading through it, yeah, it has damn changed, and it's split, and there's more to it. And I would feel guilty for not bringing it up. You know what? I don't know it. That's why we've got Carrie. I don't know. I'm not a legal person, but at least let's get this conversation continued, because it has changed. There is change.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and I do have the bills after your Mirriam's Point videos here, or slides here.
So I would just say, so like Carrie had mentioned earlier, if anyone has experienced a crime, please do look into this for yourself, because there are various, there's different variations. Like, if it happened in these circumstances, then it equals A. And I would also advise you, try and reach out to lawyers who have taken on similar cases, like lawyers that are representing other historical abuse cases that have occurred within an institution that were covered up. So I'd look at those sort of adjacent kind of things, and to try and get more informed about it. So, again, let's mention RAINN. You could reach out to RAINN, RAINN, if you're in the US, for example. But in terms a legal thing, try and reach out to an attorney, particularly one if it occurred in California, particularly an attorney in California, because there are just if it happened in this situation, it is this. If it's before this, it's that. Da 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 da. But I just sort of took some, try and summarize it a little bit.
Yeah, there's exceptions to the rule, and then there's exceptions to the exceptions to the rule, and then there's And that
I jokingly said that if the A positive blood person screws a B negative person, they get an O positive baby with red hair, they're eligible. But if they get a baby with green hair, they're not eligible, because that's just legislative math. That's just screwy.
Yeah.
But
So the other thing as well that's important is when the year that the crime occurred. So for example, any crimes that occurred from 2009 onwards, I believe 2009 onwards is still current. You can file a complaint for civil. And then again, it might be different for criminal. So you have to look at also the date that it occurred. Yeah. There we go at the bottom. Survivors who were, that's for over 18. But yeah, so as you can see, there's I don't kind of really want to read through it, because I feel like it's going to be particular to each person's circumstance. Yeah.
That's okay. I just want, this is for basically those that want to take this later, they can read through it later. Um, I did have a note down at the bottom there that there's two different bills, there's two different laws. One is for the child abuse, sexual abuse. The other law, and we're going to let Carrie talk about this a little bit because it's confusing, is for the cover up, for strictly for the cover up. And that there is a window until 2026. There's a no look back window open right now for those cases.
And so you can file it all under the one case, just by the way, the perpetrator and the organization and named individuals. Like, for example, in the Gavin Potter case, so it's Jane Doe versus Gavin Potter, Scientology, and David Miscavige. So the organization, its leader, also the perpetrator, which is a
Right.
I mean, I can't wait for that to kick off. That should be kicking off, if no further delays, I think towards the end of this year, next year. So yeah, 2025, September 2025 was the last I had heard. Yeah.
And there were two, Carrie, we keep talking, I'm sorry. There
okay.
were two law firms that were very helpful for this. One was the Herman Law, and I'll put a link down below for that one. It's in the other video that I did. Their law, they were extremely, but they do 18 and under. And then the other one, who has done litigation against the Catholic Church and all sorts of sexual abuse claims, was the one that is litigating the Delphi claim right now. And that is Siertzi, name
That's
just
right.
flew right outside my head. And they specialize in sexual abuse claims also from organizations or people that are
Yeah,
represented.
that's a really good one to highlight. So
Yep.
this case is in regards to Delphi in California. Delphi, it's actually Delphi, Los Angeles, I believe, who's being sued for having known the director knew about the sexual assaults of children and minors. And recommended the perpetrator onto another organization, another school, and when he went to that school, he then continued to commit offenses.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they're another good place to call, even just to get an intake, to get these on record as intakes.
Yeah.
So here is the Assembly Bill 218 that we've been referencing. This is the original one. The existing law requires that an action for recovery is within 8 years of the when you turn 18. So it has to be done by 26. That was the law. So they changed it to expand the definition of child sexual abuse to include all the different levels. They expanded it to 22 years past 18. So that's where the age 40 comes in. And then 5 years if the date of the plaintiff discovers it. So you could be up to 45 years if you were to figure out, oh, that was abuse when you were 40. And these are for the civil claim.
Mona, and Mona, I just want to point out, see, this act changed the definition, see that top line there, so expanded the definition of child sexual abuse, which would instead, so now we term it differently. Now we refer to it as childhood sexual assault. I think that's really a really important change, because childhood sexual abuse is just such a it almost minimizes it. It sounds like it happened over a period of time. There was It's very vague. But childhood sexual assault is feels for me like it's every incident, because every incident was an assault on the child. I just like that. It seems to separate it out a bit better. So this is what I mentioned earlier about the actual terminology and definitions have changed with this new act.
Right. Carrie, what does recovery of up to treble damages? Is that triple?
No. Treble
So,
damages is a particular type of damages, kind of like how I talked about like punitive damages, treble damages. Since I'm a public interest lawyer, I don't get those because that's where the big bucks come into play.
Oh,
Treble
okay.
damages is money. That's big time money awards. Big time. Yeah.
So, so the result that the child sexual abuse occurred on or after January 1st, 2009.
The other thing I wanted to add as well is there is stipulation for, oh, here we go. Yeah, reasonably discovered that the psychological injury or illness occurring. So that's a really good point for people to be aware of too, because often when the injury occurred and when the actual effects of it and realizing how it's affected you in the injury, psychological injury, can be some years apart. You can that can make a difference on where the statute of limitations is being based on, like how many years from when you realized X. You know what I mean?
Right. But this is where it's changed from the time of the accident or the incident to when you're 18. So you go to 40 years of age.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it was when you were 5, 10, 17. The time starts clicking when you're 18 and goes 22 years up to your 40.
And this is if it happened after, if the incident happened in 2009 or following.
That's a Carrie question.
Currently, you can make a claim.
Yeah,
you can currently make a claim, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not seeing where the 2009 is. If you're talking about it,
the second last paragraph.
Yeah, the Government Claims Act might be different. I mean, that's for suing. I would think Government Claims Act would be if you're suing an agency, a government agency. I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
What I'm seeing in 340.1 and 340.11 is January 1st, 2024. I'm not seeing the 2009.
That's the new one, right? But this goes back to 2009.
I'd have to look at this Government Claims Act because just by the title, it makes me think it's if CYS failed to move you out of the foster home that you were being abused in, you got SA'd, like that would be a claim against the government,
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, thanks
That's
for
what the
clarifying
title
that.
makes me think, but I'd have to read that. So
Okay, that makes sense.
I can take a look at that.
Well, now I started chewing a nut, but I have a question. Hang on one second. I'm trying to keep myself nourished here during this, but in regards to that Government Claims Act asterisk here, because when we're talking specifically about minors in Scientology, very, very specifically about those like Mirriam who were housed in the C organization as a minor, okay, either as a cadet or then later as an actual laborer in the Scientology C organization workforce as a minor. In a lot of those instances where the child was born to non-C organization parents, that child would have to be signed over to a legal guardian inside of the C organization. So the parent would give up their parental rights. Would the C organization, which of course does not exist on paper anywhere, or Scientology by that matter, be held accountable under that kind of act where the sexual assault of a minor is then covered up even by their legal guardian inside of that organization? Like, would that be something that would be, because I could name like 3 people who that caveat would apply to because their parents weren't Sea Org members, but they were in the Sea organization under the age of 18. So
are you differentiating between the perpetrator of the sexual assault and the person who let them be exposed to sexual assault?
Correct.
Okay. Because it's action for liability against any person or entity who owed a duty of care to the plaintiff. If the plaintiff is now an adult, was a child whose care was signed over to Scientology John Smith,
right,
by mom and dad, John Smith has assumed the duty of care to that child. And so that is someone who owes a duty of care. And if he violates that duty of care, he's on the hook.
Okay. Yeah, because there's several, there's hundreds probably of stories where children who were born to Scientology parents who were not Sea Org members then became Sea Org members, at the age of 12, etc. And then these acts were committed up on them inside of the Sea organization, covered up by everybody, including their legal guardian, who did nothing.
Right.
So that's another person to add into the mix, essentially, in terms of like who we're holding accountable then.
Correct. And remember, we're talking about the statute of limitations. I don't have the tort of child SA from California, that statute in front of me. But if there is a cause of action for that, this time frame says, look, if you owe this plaintiff a duty of care and you mess it up, you are subject to, not having a statute of limitations applied to you,
Because there's a number of people who could be named in that for sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Mirriam. You were going to say something?
Oh, that's such a great point, Nora. That's thank you so much for bringing that up. And I wanted to add to that children of Sea Org parents did not get assigned a legal guardian unless it was like a specific case. Like, for example, I ran away, got picked up by LAPD in Los Angeles, and when I ran away from the Blue Buildings, and then was taken to like a temporary foster home, and then Scientology was able to locate me and bring me back. They had filed a missing persons report on me. It's a whole thing. But once I came back, that was then, after that, they then assigned me a legal guardian. So the next time I got picked up by LAPD, which did happen, I was able to say, oh, I have a legal guardian. And anyway, the kids that were in the Sea Org that had Sea Org parents, it was basically no one gave an F unless a situation arose that they needed to have some extra things in place. But that is also a good point as well, because my legal guardian was informed of what the crimes that my father had committed against me. Yeah, so it's a great point, Nora.
Yeah, and the other instance where children would get a legal guardian even if they had Sea Org parents was, let's say the parents were working in the Blue Buildings and the child got promoted to the Gold Base or something like that in Hemet, right? They would then get a legal guardian there to take over anything like medical and things like that, because the parents who were now located in Los Angeles are not allowed to go to the Hemet location, even in the case of something's up with their child, because they don't have the clearances to be at that facility. The other thing that Scientology was very keen on, and this would get into a whole other branch of law that I don't know about, is they were very keen on getting teens married off, either to other teenagers, or to adults, right? Like in the case of the security chief, Celebrity Center International, the current one, James Richardson, he was 27 when he married his second wife, who was 14, 15 at the time. Okay. And they do that on purpose because then, obviously, as in California, and I don't know if it's still the law, but if you get married, you're an emancipated minor. Your parents no longer have any legal rights to you. You're considered a legal adult. You don't have any school requirements. You can work as long as, they can work you. It doesn't matter, because at that point you're an adult. So the legal guardian thing really fell to the wayside later in the Scientological years. This is why, certain people say, oh, there's no more kids because they're such a hassle. that's very true because the legal guardians would, sometimes they would get RPF'd or they would leave the Sea Org, and then another legal guardian was never assigned to the child. So the solution then was always to get this kid married, because then they don't need one. Who cares? They're an adult now. Right? Is there some way, is like a forced marriage situation? Is that, and I don't, like I said, this is a whole other area of law, is like enforcing marriage in that way. Is that another thing that you can add into this sort of sexual nonsense? Because it is very much a forced marriage. Like, you're not allowed to do anything in the Sea Organization when you're a Sea Org member prior to marriage other than holding hands and maybe French kissing, and that's it. So as a teen, I mean, we've all been teenagers once. You can't, you have hormones, all this other stuff. So you get married so you can do all those other things, right? So I don't know if that adds into it or whatever.
So Nora, yes, absolutely does. So in a civil case, absolutely. And then there's also, let's mention as well, you can have federal cases. I think we should do a whole other thing on what's an FBI case, what's a federal case, because you have federal law. Right now we're focusing on state law, because there's other factors there, Nora, that you've mentioned that would, if you're talking about across an organization, is more of a federal case. In terms of this, so for a civil case, for example, a perfect example of that is the Gavin Potter. So Jane Doe versus Gavin Potter, Scientology, and David Miscavige, in which that is part of the complaint, in which she describes that. And here's another added layer. Here's a layer, additional layer to what you've said, Nora, is that where there's actual intimidation and threat of punishment, because she had, they had said to her, so she had experienced sexual assaults as a 16-year-old girl by a 26-year-old man. Allegedly, this is what's described in the plaintiff's complaint. And the Scientology officials had said, well, you can either get married or you can go on the punishment program, this prison camp called the RPF, or the Rehabilitation Project Force. So that's an additional layer where she is then allegedly coerced into this forced marriage to stave off this horrific punishment. In these prison camps, you could get stuck in them for many, many years. Nora has spoken about the RPF. She was on the RPF. That's a important part of your story, Nora. And I was also on the RPF, but I was on the RPF for 4 months, and that was horrific enough. And it is a very scary and intimidating thing that is held over the head of anyone who is in the Sea Org, across the board. But in this particular civil case, that is part of the complaint, and which is, where you see her naming not just the perpetrator, but the organization as well.
Yeah.
And anyways, I think that's good enough.
So then,
I just wanted to add one more thing. Sorry, just one more thing, because Nora was describing.
Mirriam's trying to do a Columbo.
Nora was
it's okay.
describing. I want to get as much information in there, because this is something that is so important to me. But the other thing I wanted to add is Nora was talking about abuse within an institution. That's what you were sort of describing. And so in Australia, I just wanted to add, there are no statute of limitations in place for child sexual abuse, or in terms of the institution's involvement. So that's really important to know. Across the US, it's state by state, it's a bit trickier. But for this, the Australian states uniformly have agreed, no, we're not going to have statute of limitations. And that came about 2015 as a result of the Royal Commission into the cover-up of sexual abuse within institutions.
Yeah, and somebody in the chat mentioned it's the same in Canada, that there's no statute of limitations for child sexual assault also. So that's great. So if you're in Canada or Australia, avail yourself of that for sure. But if you're in America, you got to run this gamut and this laser tag of figuring out the laws,
Yeah, the other thing to consider when we talked about earlier deciding criminal or civil or both or whatever. The other thing is, oh my God, I just totally lost my train of thought. Sorry, what were you saying before that? Oh my God.
Running the maze.
Anyway,
Run the
sorry.
gamut. Everybody has different laws in this darn states.
Yeah, it was about the criminal versus civil. Anyways, it'll come back to me. Sorry, guys. Let's keep going. It'll come back.
That's okay. Well, I wanted to bring in and to let you know, I did invite the author of this bill, albeit late, but I did offer her to come on or to at least be in the chat. And I haven't seen to see if she is in the chat. She may or may not be. It's Buffy Wicks, the assembly member in California that wrote this bill. And it's another bill. It's a step for sexual abuse in the Cover-Up Accountability Act. It's different than what we were discussing in the other one. It's an addition to. So the old law, there was an old law, and it was talking about, I think, the 340.16, which is what we were talking about in the other bill. And this bill is until December 31st, 2026.
Oh,
This is the one that is it doesn't have the statute of limitations for the 2 years, for 3 years. So up until 2026, just like when they did it with when Mike Rinder did it with Child USA, this is the same thing. However, it's not a carte blanche. This is about employer cover-up or cover-up from institutions or religious organizations or schools. So this is based on cover-up.
And I'm sorry, Mona, can you give me the citation for that? I think you had it on the other slide. It was AB
2777.
2777. And the year was 2022 that it came out?
Yes.
I thought I saw that. Okay. I want to read that because that could be a game changer.
This is the one that I keep saying. This is definitely a change.
Yeah.
And as I said, it's confusing to read through it and you're going, what? But it's definitely a game changer, and people should be, especially those that were employed or in volunteer ministry or in an institution like Sea Org or the Church of Scientology, should be looking at this new law.
Absolutely. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, I remembered what I was going to say before. In considering whether to go criminal or civil, one of the things to know about criminal is that the conviction rate is very, very, very low. Would anyone like to guess what the successful conviction rate is for sexual assault?
5%.
Across, let's say, okay. Carrie,
I'm gonna be a little bit more optimistic and have faith in my former colleagues and say 25.
Mona, you got a guess?
I don't think I have as much faith. I'd say about 12.
So it ranges between 1% to 3% across like Western countries, particularly like the Commonwealth or the countries that I looked at, like Australia, Canada, UK. But yeah, so between 1% to 3%, like somewhere like 1.5%, 2.5%. I think Australia is 3% on the higher end of that. But yeah, so the rate of conviction is extremely, extremely, extremely low. In fact, in Australia, only 13% of cases actually make it to court. 13% of cases make it to court.
So that's 3% of the 13% that made it to court that end up in a conviction.
Wow, that's
3% of the overall. 3% of the overall amount.
I see.
Yeah. It goes down from 13%. Yep, down to 3%. That is actually
That's just,
convicted.
It's wild.
So,
it's wild to think of. Yeah.
So
It just
I
makes
really
me
want to
sad.
give. Yeah. It's horrifying that this is, and that's the thing is like this. The sexual assault is it's among, and then here's the other factor: sexual assault is among the least reported crime. So we're not even getting the prevalence in reporting, let alone the convictions. So this is another thing. That's why if you see this in a statement anywhere, like, oh well, this can't be valid because they never filed criminal. I want people to understand that there are so many reasons why a person would choose not to file criminal and only go civil, and all the power to them, because that can be the way that they want to do it. So yeah.
And how many times do we see it reported in the news like, oh, this is a money grab? The defendant's attorney on a civil lawsuit
100%.
immediately says,
Right.
this is a money grab, this is a money grab.
I mean, it's so gross. I have to point out one thing because we're just talking about this, and I'm going to swing back to Law and Order here for a second. That our justice system is so stalled in this country that Mariska Hargitay, the star of Law and Order SVU, Special Victims Unit, in just like encompassing her character, Detective Olivia Benson, she found out that the backlog in America of like run rape kits was like in the millions, just sitting there, just at rape kits that hospitals had turned into the police department, that they're like, okay, well, thanks so much for that, and they're just like, it's just in a warehouse somewhere where nobody's ever going to see it. And she fought for legislation across the board to get that area staffed so that those rape kits could be run, so that the database would actually work when people are arrested and their DNA is sampled, and it's like, oh, bro, you've been very active. We need to put you away for a long time, because they weren't even able to know, right? But they just had millions of women who had bravely said, gone to a hospital and been like, I've just been assaulted, please do the things. And then those things went nowhere. So, sometimes the TV show people end up helping the law to progress. And we have Mariska Hargitay to thank for that in this country, for at least getting attention put on the necessity to process these things. And that's just regular Law and Order, right? For non-culty, highly controlled religious sect people, right? Who would definitely, especially in Scientology, be told, oh, no, we're not doing any of it. We're not sampling any of that. No. Like putting a celebrity's DNA in a database. Can you imagine? I can't. It just would be like, that's the living end. That would be,
Carrie had an interesting solution to that part of it. But
I did?
Yeah, you were talking about having state to state an intent where they're looked at.
A state to state intent where people are looked at?
Yeah, like a list to where people were being looked at.
Oh, are you talking about Childline, the child abuse database?
Yes.
Oh, yes. So most states have a child abuse registry, but there is no national child abuse registry. There is no NCIC of the child abuse registry. So a lot of times, and I've done child welfare for over 10 years. We'd run Childline in Pennsylvania, and we'd rely on the person saying, oh, I haven't lived anywhere else. Right. Meanwhile, they have a whole bunch of founded and indicated child abuse reports in Idaho that we don't know anything about because we didn't know to ask Idaho.
That's the same thing that happened with the Boy Scouts, is that like a predator would be in one state and then he would get caught and found out, and then he would just go to another state and start up the whole thing because the state associations of the Boy Scouts were doing the same thing that the federal government's doing. It's like, oh, well, this is our state, so we just deal with our state. We don't talk to California. Gross, like, and that's part of the problem, is that we don't have the database. I mean, everybody has their own database, but they haven't connected the databases in 2024 altogether, which is ridiculous.
Yeah,
to say
and
that. So
this is what's described as. Yeah, and so understand that Scientology, and by the way, Catholic Church did this as well, moving the perpetrators around. But Scientology and the Office of Special Affairs is particularly aware of this weakness, and that's across, all sort of state legislation for varying crimes, not just child abuse, but that's why they created this thing called the OSA drill, which was to move either or both the victim or the perpetrator. Because one of the things is, so if you're a victim of a crime, you have to report at the location of your residency. So if you've been moved from California to Florida, you're going to do your police report with Florida. Now, what happens is then that can then just even with that, it can create delays and complications and drag out a case. And then also historically the statute of limitations have been so terribly. So you could have a case expire. So these are all the sort of the tricks and stuff that the Office of Special Affairs and organizations are aware of, and in institutions and religious institutions, whatever, are aware of and can kind of move around the things. And this is the thing that is great about the statute of limitations being removed, because they won't be able to do that so much. Like, they can't just have a case just expiring because of like the difficulties with communicating to various agencies. And also like networks and reporting are a lot better. But that's a really good point. There was also there was a YouTube, because a whole other subject of child abuse is YouTubers who use their children for content, and some of them have included abuse of the children, but there was a case where they just simply moved off to another state, and that's really important to know that like the state-to-state communication is not happening and reporting is not happening. There should be something that flags a person of like there's a history.
And this is certainly
what an easy win for a freshman congressman or somebody who wants to make a name in federal government to put together a bill that basically creates an NCIC for child lines. I mean, it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
It would be such an easy win, but people aren't paying attention to it. So
that was one of the
that's so
mentions
important.
I was going to make to SAFE, the Stand Against Fear and Exploitation, of maybe that could be one of their targets, is to support and encourage that new legislation.
Yeah.
That just seems like it's so essential. And this is the protection of the most vulnerable population, children. Like, every person in a society has a responsibility to advocate and protect children. Period. Like, that is what it is.
Mirriam, you would think it would be really easy to get politicians and policymakers behind that, because everybody pays lip service to that, right? But having worked in the trenches of child welfare, having spoken to state representatives, state senators, county commissioners, people from the governor's office, I can tell you, everybody pays lip service, but actually getting something done, getting change, getting funding, it's nobody wants it. Nobody wants to do it because politicians can't sell that as easily as they can sell putting more cops on the street and building more prisons. So that's just my little soapbox moment there. But
Bingo.
Okay, so civil actions in USA, Florida. So it's in Title 8 of the Florida Statute, Chapter 95. If you want to go to the Florida State Legislature and see the statute for yourself, it's 95.11, subparagraph 10, and then 95.11, subparagraph 8. Any case where the victim under 16 at time of the offense has no statute of limitations. This applies to cases not time barred already as of July 1, 2010.
What does that mean, Carrie?
So time barred means the statute of limitations did run out. So it expired. So as long as of July 1, 2010, your case was not time barred, you can use this section 95.1110 if you were under 16 at the time.
And this is new, correct?
I'd have to pull up the effective date. I would imagine so, but I'd have to look at the effective date of the section to know exactly when it was passed. And then 95.11.8, within 7 years after turning 18. So lawyers don't do math, so I think that is before turning 25, or within 4 years of discovering the injury and the connection between the abuse and the injury, whichever is later. And this came up in that California discussion we were doing with the turning 40 or within 5 years of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can overemphasize enough how important that or provision is. Having something that says, look, if you discover that you will have an injury and it's connected to abuse that you suffered, and you discover that at 60 years of age, and you have the therapeutic notes and the expert witness report to document that, that gives you your cause of action time, regardless of turning 40. And here, regardless of turning 25. That is immensely important. So I just wanted to
that's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely. Someone had put in I seen it earlier. Someone had put in the chat there that she didn't realize that she had DID for many years, dissociative identity disorder, I think is what it is, which is very common she mentioned is very common, for sexual assault trauma victims, or even just for any trauma victims, because that's what, like, dissociation is kind of like hand in hand with trauma. Trauma makes you want to kind of exit your body. Trauma lives in the body keeps the score. So yes, psychological. So that's why we talk about psychological injury as a result of it, and it may not be known for many years later.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I just threw this in. Tolling of a statute of limitations is when it's on hold, so it's paused. So there's in Chapter 95, a defendant's absence from the state of Florida can toll the statute of limitations, or concealment within the state of Florida so that the defendant cannot be served. And who do we know who likes to conceal his whereabouts so that he cannot be served?
David Miscavige.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ta-da! Nora gets the win.
Nora wins the prize. So,
I mean,
yeah.
The truth of the matter is, he's easy. And I've said this to law enforcement many times. He's easy to find. You know why? Because he's a narcissistic pig and he wants to be on stage. Where was he just last weekend? He was in Los Angeles on stage at the Shrine Auditorium, okay, doing his little tap dance for the Scientologists for the New Year's event. Even if you just look for him once a year, if you know where they're going to record that, that's where he's going to be. Like, this is the laziest, we can't find him. We've served him ever. But you know where he's going to be. He's going to be where he can shine on stage. Okay, that's made by slave labor, and he gets to wear his, $5,000 tuxedo, and he's going to go up there. It's so easy. That's where he is, where the spotlight is on him. I don't understand why nobody was there to serve him with papers.
Oh, they had LAPD
all of these pending lawsuits.
LAPD could have done it.
Yeah, they hired enough of them. This is the part of law enforcement that I don't understand. Someone with active service pending against them that they know people have tried to serve and all this other stuff. And then they're just sitting there collecting their 10 grand for one night. And they're like, I don't see anything. I don't even know who you're talking about. Oh, the guy in the suit, I didn't see him. What? It just doesn't, it drives me nuts. If I
wanted to serve a narcissist who loved attention, I think I'd make up an award and make up an organization and invite them to receive the award. Boom. Your award is service of process.
Now, they did that once in a sting. Where was it? New York, where they were trying to get all these people who it was one specific crime. I can't remember what all these people had done, but they basically, they told them they had all won some portion of a lottery, and they had to come to this hotel to collect their portion of the
remember
winnings.
that.
And it was a very specific, I forget what the crime was, right? So they have all these guys in this conference room in like the Hilton, in Hoboken or whatever, right? And then as soon as the doors closed, like they were just surrounded by police that served them. And it was like, you're all going to jail.
I love that. I love
Right?
that.
Oh,
We
man.
didn't touch on some of these questions. So, Carrie,
Yes.
are there time constraints for prosecution? If a claim gets filed and to the DA or the city attorney takes it up, do they have time constraints on their end?
Yes. The statute of limitations on a crime, a victim doesn't file the charges. The DA's office does. So they would be up against, getting that deadline in. And if they blow it, that's a problem. But yeah, there's that. And then there's also the speedy trial rule. There's also pre-arrest delay, which is kind of connected to the speedy trial rule, where there's unreasonable delay that's caused prejudice to the defendant, even if it's within the statute of limitations. So there's some constitutional protections in criminal. That kind of goes back to what Mirriam was saying as to why somebody may want to only pursue civil, because you kind of don't quite have that, those constitutional issues. So
Okay.
yes, there is stuff there that applies.
So next question.
So as Carrie said,
Yep.
as Carrie said, it's the when you're talking about statute of limitations, the DA has to file the charge before that's expired. So what you're talking about is like the reporting of the case, obtaining all the evidence, doing the investigator. So for example, LAPD investigator who's assigned the case, they have to do all of their collection of evidence and making sure that this is a solid case. Okay, I'm confident to now. Then they do their report. That report then goes to the DA's office for them to make a decision. Sometimes it can sit there a few months before they even review the file. So you're thinking, and that's why these statute of limitations just have to be taken out, because all of that can take years. Just that whole process before a DA even reviews, let alone then charges a case. So it's pretty significant.
Thank you, Mirriam. So let's say somebody's listening to us and they go, oh, I might be eligible for the statute of limitation, or just, the wheels are starting to turn in their coggy little brain. Where is the best place for a person to start on a complaint? Let's just use civil.
Okay.
And do they go file with a PD? Do they file with an attorney? And second part to that question is, what if they don't live in California or Florida or the place where it happened?
Well, it doesn't matter if they don't now live in the place where it happened. We're talking about Florida and California law applying over the instance, the occurrence, the event.
Okay.
The location of the event is what gives jurisdiction to the state of California or the state of Florida. So if, I'm a Pennsylvania resident, but I'm receiving Scientology courses in Florida, and while I'm down there, I get raped. Pennsylvania doesn't have jurisdiction just because I'm a resident. Florida does, because the event happened in that state. So it doesn't matter if
But
you don't
you have
live
to
in
report.
anymore.
Yes, absolutely correct. But so you have to report to your local police department that is if we're talking about criminal, that is, your local police department that is within your jurisdiction of where you currently reside. The law that applies, which is what Carrie was saying, the law that applies to the crime is the law that's applicable in the state of the where the crime occurred, and also when the crime occurred. Those two factors.
Okay.
Now, so do not, if you decide I only want to go civil, do not file a police report. I would say, or speak to your attorney is what I would say. So the answer to the question is, the first point of contact, it really comes down to how you want to pursue it. If you only want to go civil, you're going to be talking to your attorney. Only file a police report if I'm not a legal expert. if they recommend that as a part of like where they see that the case could be, more solid or whatever. But if you want to go criminal, you would contact the local police department of where you currently reside. Is that right,
Yeah,
Carrie?
and they might send you to the police department where the event happened, because there may
Right.
not be a
They
lot
do
for the
that.
local PD to do. Most of the investigation is going to be down there.
So
And
that is true. So sorry, let me
yeah,
explain that. That is absolutely true. So what will happen is that they then will transfer the case to the state or, the county where the crime occurred. That state or county or whatever has the jurisdiction. They then investigate it and pursue that case. It is there. They own that case there. But that's how it has to start off. And I know it sounds like really weird, especially if you're in a different country. I mean, that's the problem that I've had. Like, I'm in Australia. The crimes occurred in the U.S. I have to file in Australia. And that some crimes occurred in a different state in Australia. There's other crimes that occurred in Australia that are in a different state to where I currently reside, but I have to file it. Originally, the first filing, if you're going to go the criminal route, is that you're going to file it with your local police department where you reside. They then have to do that process where they transfer it to where the crime occurred, and the jurisdiction of where the crime occurred, they then pursue it. Yeah, to see how that can kind of complicate things. And this is, again, why these organizations will want to move people, victims and perpetrators, outside the jurisdiction, because it makes these compounding sort of like complicating factors. And it adds time when you're talking about statute of limitations applying.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me give you a scenario, and I'm going to use Mirriam and Nora. I don't know that this really happened. I'm just saying this is a scenario that historically you had an issue back at Blue. Something happened, and you want to do a civil claim now. So would you find an attorney in where you're at, Nora, and where you're at, Mirriam, or would you find an attorney in California to converse with?
Great
Are
question.
you asking me?
Yeah. Do you want to ask Nora or me or each separately?
And any of you.
Nora, you go. I think she's
You're
muted,
muted.
though.
You're on mute, though, Nora. You're sounding really profound.
You look like you have really great information there.
Guys, I just said a whole lecture. No. So it looks like my understanding of this would be that like I would have to find a California attorney in that instance to litigate that for me, because if I contact someone here in Oregon where I reside, they probably don't have the bar association stuff to like practice in California, so it would make more sense to find is that correct, Carrie, or do we can find any lawyer?
So someone from Oregon could be admitted pro hoc vici, which
Okay.
is basically like, hi, I'm not licensed in your state, but I'm working with someone who is. So please admit me just for this case.
Got you.
I would recommend one in each. One in the state where you reside, that's your initial consult. And then they would work to find the right lawyer in the jurisdiction where
Tag team
is going to be. Yes, that would be ideal.
Okay. Yeah. Because I know each state has its own bar requirements. New York and California being the two hardest states in the country to pass the bar in. So not unless you're residing in California as a lawyer, most people are like, I'm not doing that. That's a lot of time and money that I don't need to do if I'm just practicing in Iowa, or whatever.
No, a pro hoc vici admission requires that a licensed California lawyer would be like, oh yeah, I know CarrieJ. She's going to work with me. It's okay. Just let her in just for this case.
Got it.
So let's take like the Diddy and Jay-Z cases, for example. From what I understand, the lawyer, Tony Busby, he is located in Texas. And he has all these cases. He's one by one sort of filing them as he goes in, but he's got over 100 claims. And then I think, as I understand, I believe that they're being filed in New York. And I believe that maybe be because the New York has different statute of limitations for civil. I'm not sure. I know that Johnny Depp, for example, he filed his civil in a specific state because it was able to be televised there, or it was something like that. So there are kind of variations as to where you why you would file in certain places. But like, for example, Tony Busby being a Texas lawyer is not a lawyer in the area that potentially the crimes occurred. I think, they occurred across the U.S., but I think a lot of them occurred in Los Angeles, for example. So I think that there's different kind of things that would come into play there. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if let's say it was me and I was at Flag and I want to civilly sue Church of Scientology, David Miscavige, and whomever my perpetrator was down in Florida, but I'm in Michigan. Do I need to call around in Florida to find a lawyer? That's kind of my question, is how does somebody start that?
The answer is not necessarily. Basically, the answer is, which Carrie was explaining, is like there aren't really any set rules, like if I'm getting that right. But I think your preference, and I liked what you said about maybe you do both in the location that you currently are and the location that you're going to be litigating it in, or where the crime occurred, I think is what you're saying. So an attorney that is for that state is going to have familiarity with the laws for that state. They're going to be more familiar with those laws. I think that's an important thing. Your question is like, where would you start? I honestly think start anywhere. And I think reach out to several people, like reach out to, first of all, I would look at, this is the number one thing. Let's pare it back to basics, because look at what their history is. Like, what kind of cases have they litigated? Have they litigated cases that where, if you're going to be pursuing a sexual assault complaint, is it, do they have history of successfully litigating against an institution for sexual assault, if that's what you're wanting to do? That's what I would look into. I think there is an advantage of it being in the same state that the crimes occurred, or the same state that you're going to be litigating it in, because of the familiarity. But I would really, it's really important to look at the history of the company that you're looking at. Would you say, Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to sue in Florida, you need a Florida attorney. I can't file Mona for you because I'm not licensed in Florida, so I can't practice law in Florida.
Okay.
The benefit of having an attorney local is as a good starting point. It's in your area, it's in your community. You probably know of someone, or know of someone who knows of someone that you can go to have that very challenging first conversation of, this is what happened to me, and I'd like to see if there's something that can be done about it. That's a very challenging conversation to have over Zoom or over the phone. Lawyers, we know people all over. Like I have a colleague who, practiced in Oklahoma and then practiced in DC, and like he's been all over the place. And if I call him and say I need a lawyer in Florida, he probably would know somebody, so it would be easier for your local counsel to find the right lawyer in Florida than it would be for you to try to find the right lawyer in Florida. So that's another reason maybe to do that.
Point taken.
That's a really good point. The other thing as well is it's gives you a starting point. And so, for example, like with Scientology, it would be great to have a big law firm take it on, because of the amount of time and the cost that they're going to have to be able to like hold in the meantime, right? To sort of cover in the meantime. So a big law firm would be ideal, but maybe that's not your starting point. Maybe your starting point is, like Carrie was saying, like your local attorney, and that sounds like a really something that is more for the victim. Like if you're talking about the process being easier or better, that's definitely a route to go. I think that's a great point, Carrie.
Thank you, you guys. Okay, so the next question. What is your view on the conflict of interest between Church of Scientology and specifically LAPD or Clearwater Police Department?
Oh, man.
That's like a whole street.
Filing charges.
I can't even hit my vape to answer this one. My goodness. Yeah, I'd say it's a problem. Listen, I was a prosecutor for 8 years, including in federal court. So I was a special assistant United States attorney. You do not want, especially if they're your affiant, the cop that has signed on the warrant, okay? But you do not want any cop witness that you're presenting having a reason to lie. Okay, that's called bias. And in criminal, failure by the prosecution to disclose a witness's bias, especially a police officer's potential bias, that's called a Brady violation. That's exculpatory information. It is mandatory disclosure in criminal cases. Failure to do so basically invalidates any conviction that might have happened, and the defendant gets a complete redo. You don't want a cop who has a potential bias on the stand, period. And police officers really, they make a lot of money. I know that they do these overtime things to make even more. Number one, I don't think they should be allowed to do it in uniform and using LAPD equipment or vehicles or uniform. And number two, for it to be for an organization like Scientology that has a history, especially after Danny Masterson, it should be off the table, because they've prosecuted someone, and a key component of that prosecution was the Church of Scientology. So that should be a no-go, because it raises the appearance of impropriety. It raises a reason for the police officer to lie to protect Scientology somehow, because it protects their paycheck by doing overtime with Scientology.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my answer.
I'm just going to say that there's two things as well to consider. You have let's say we're looking at California, and so the state of California and then LAPD. So the district attorney's office is the one that is charging the case. But LAPD, for example, is the one that is investigating the case. So this is where it gets like murky waters. You have to run that gambit first before you're relying on LAPD. And again, this could be another reason why you want to go civil and not touch the criminal. You're reliant on that LAPD investigator to investigate your case as appropriately and professionally and as best as they can, and then hopefully potentially report that then onto the DA's office. The DA's office then decides whether or not they're going to charge that case. Now, in terms of the DA's office, I think there is such a high caliber staff that, and there's some really interesting things. I'm not going to dive into it too much, but with the prosecution of the Danny Masterson case, and there was some things that happened. Just as an example. Anyways, I don't want to segue too much. There's so much to cover. That's a really good story. But but just to say, there could be challenges, because I'm not 100% confident in terms of LAPD. There seems to be quite a variation of who's affected and who's not. And then there's a whole for example, the Hollywood division sounds like there's a history of some conflict of interest there. But yeah, so that can be a scary prospect. But the DA's office, if you can get your case to the DA's office, run that gambit, I think you can have a lot of confidence in the DA's office once they do charge the case, if they do charge the case, for example. Right. But one thing I just wanted to mention is during the second trial of Danny Masterson, Police Chief Moore allowed Vicky Podbresky and other Scientology representatives to come to LAPD with boxes and boxes of files and information and documents and stuff that they had, because they were alleging the misconduct of LAPD officers. Some of these LAPD officers were about to take the stand in the trial. The trial was active, and Chief Moore allowed Vicky Podbresky to come in and lay all these claims against these officers who had taken the initial statements or who were investigating the case, and to allege that they had misconduct. So those officers, that caused intimidation and threat for them, that they may worry about that they did actually, in fact, it was stated by one of them that they were worried about their job. So there is that, like, where things can have an effect. You have people that are about to take the stand to give testimony, and there's this Scientology conflict. Scientology is literally at LAPD making claims against them with the LAPD chief. So yeah, just wanted to add that in as a side story there.
I mean, they don't stop the intimidation. They don't stop the coercion just at their own members, right? I mean, the fact that they're paying off-duty and former cops, 10 times their hourly rate to come and, patrol because they know there are going to be protesters or there's fancy pants event or whatever, I don't know any other church that does that. I can't name another, supposedly a religious organization that does that in any area in this country, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that the LAPD has allowed their officers to take in this money, and then when they find out that one of these people that, they're supposedly paying off with the Police Activities League and all this other stuff, is now actually doing their police job, against Scientology. Well, hot dog, we're coming in with a van load of documents showing how terrible this officer is, and you should kick them off the force immediately because you're not doing what we want. So it is, in some respects, I know people like to try to poo Scientology and be like, oh, it's so small. There's not that many members who really care. It's not like on the scale of the Catholic Church. Is it like they have taken every single instance of abuse and everything else and coercion that any other religion has tried to do, and they've cranked it all the way up to 11 every single time. And they've usurped our country's laws, in every place that they exist, all the way now up to, the White House. And it's really scary that any organization, religious or not, could have the power to do that simply because they have so much money, but they figured out how to get that money tax exempt, which is even worse, right? So they just have this, never ending war chest of funds to do whatever they want, and in the process they're breaking every possible law.
Well, even one instance of institutional concealment of child sexual assault is too many. I don't know how anybody can look at you guys and I've listened to both your stories, and I know your stories, and say, well, it's too small. It's not worth our time or energy to try to put a stop to it. I disagree with anyone who would say that, because, I want to express to both of you that I'm sorry about what happened, what you guys experienced. It shouldn't have happened. It was wrong. And I'm sorry it happened. So.
Agreed. Totally agreed, Carrie.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. Yeah.
So the last question is about, is there an opportunity for a class action or a complex case, group complaints? Thoughts on that?
So class actions are for when you have, a large number of plaintiffs who all have the same or similar causes of action based on the same or similar set of circumstances. For individual instances of child sexual assault, you're not going to have a lot of commonality because you're going to have different perpetrators, you're going to have different locations, you're different instances. What you might have a lot of commonality is the concealment, the cover-up process, the entity, the organization, the structure, as Mirriam and Nora described earlier, of how it's set up to protect and insulate and protect the perpetrator and get them away and all of those things. That's where you have a lot more commonality. Class action lawsuits, you can't just declare yourself a class action lawsuit. A court has to declare you as a class. So a judge has to issue an order saying, yes, this is an appropriate class of plaintiffs, and you may now operate as a class action lawsuit. So it has its own different rules and things like that. Class action, you know, the lawyers who do that stuff, I mean, they get big verdicts. It's, there's kind of this, it's not really funny joke, but in my profession, that the people who benefit the most from class action are the class action attorneys, because they get 30 or 33% of the award,
Right.
the top, and then what's left gets distributed to the plaintiffs. So you can imagine that if you have a lot of plaintiffs and you don't have a huge verdict, the law firm and the people who did it, yeah, they're getting paid for their services. So, that's, I don't want to.
I mean, anyone who's had telephone service knows you get those notifications. Do you want to collect your reward from the Verizon class action lawsuit? It's like $2.17.
Yes.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That's not even a Starbucks coffee. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. But because you were like billed by Verizon incorrectly between the years of, bop, you now get a whole, $2.17 because somebody out there filed a class action lawsuit and won,
Yeah. The benefit of class action is that it really hurts the defendant. If you win a class action, you get a class action verdict and damages, you are really putting the defendant kind of into the ground financially. I mean, that's the benefit of it. You can get huge verdicts that individual plaintiffs maybe couldn't quite get. So that's a benefit. But I think it would be on the institutional concealment and cover up side more than individual instances of child SA.
That makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
That's very well put.
So what is your thoughts on a complex claim?
I don't know what that is. What is that?
Where more than one person files, but they file individually, and then it's joined as a complex, like a
I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with that, I'm going to be honest. I don't know what the benefit would be of it being joined together, except that you get maybe all in front of one judge, but they could do that via judicial assignment. So, I don't know what the benefit would be.
I wonder
So am I
if
not?
that if
Let me go ahead.
Yeah. I've never heard of a complex claim before. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm just wondering if perhaps the current suit against Danny Masterson, David Miscavige, Scientology, for the Danny Masterson victims, if that is a complex claim. I'm not sure, because that one is one where you have several plaintiffs under the one suit. And the only advantage I can think of is that you're combining the evidence, because you're having all these people giving these these statements of their own. I don't know.
And I may not be using the right terminology, but can you think of a way that people could group together to kind of like that, having all the different names on there of everybody that's been covered up, their essay had been covered up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Mary, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, the other case that comes to mind, like when you have a grouping, is there is one for, I think it's the complaint is human trafficking, but it had there was other complaints underneath that, like there was sexual assault and that sort of thing. And that one is the Baxter versus Scientology. Right. Yeah. And you have three plaintiffs in that, and their circumstances and the location, because it was all based on the free winds. I think all or most of these victims or plaintiffs reside in Australia. The case is in Florida. But yeah, that's one. But that all the circumstances and stuff are similar. Like it was the free winds and the various things that happen. Although each individual one has additional complaints. So that one, one thing we didn't mention actually, and this is where a couple of these suits are stalled, is the arbitration agreement. So that might be a conversation for another time, but that's another thing to, that's a hurdle that some of these cases, so the Danny Masterson civil case, they were able to overcome that hurdle of the arbitration agreement.
Yeah.
As well as I think Leah Remini was able to, because her complaints are for things that occurred after she had left. So this is for the harassment. These are the harassment cases.
It's one of the issues of
but
filing criminal versus civil, because criminal has no arbitration. Civil does.
great
Right,
point.
Carrie?
Great
Yeah,
point. Well,
there's
yes,
no
you cannot
arbitration in
sign a
criminal.
waiver.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really great point.
I'm not shaking my head at you, Mirriam. I'm just shaking my head about this arbitration nonsense. It just drives me nuts that time and time again, the judges in Florida, different judges, have basically ruled in favor of Scientology's illegal arbitration process when a case comes before them. In a civil thing, it happened to Luis Garcia. It happened in the Baxter case. And every time, especially in Florida, that people have tried to fight the Scientology arbitration process, they have summarily lost, and they just get shuffled off to this ridiculous process that is not arbitration. It's Scientologists that are handpicked to decide why you're such a terrible SP, and we should give, ugh. I mean, I'm surprised they don't do a toxic wash off after they're in the room with these SPs. Trying to discuss all the things that they're supposed to get. It is literally, somebody needs to make a case, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how to do that, but somebody needs to make a case against Scientology arbitration because it's not in the scriptures. It's not actually covered anywhere. It's a made up thing by OSA to keep people from getting the refund, because per Lafayette, right? If you request a refund, you're supposed to get it. Bingo, bongo, done. And you sign a piece of paper that says, I'm never going to be a Scientologist again. Here's your money. Get the fuck out of here. That's what's supposed to happen per the scriptures. And then in the late 90s, after people kept requesting big refunds of all this money that they had put on account to do courses, OSA was like, guys, we can't just keep bleeding this cash. This is ridiculous. We got to get this under control. So they came up with arbitration that they make you, as the person requesting it, pay for, and of course it's a Scientology run company, this one specific arbiter, at least in the Southern California area, that you have to pay $1,200 an hour to. And this was in the early 2000s, guys. I can't even imagine how much it is now, to handle the arbitration. You can't use any other company. It has to be that company to arbitrate your problem with Scientology. It's not like you could, there are people that are professional arbiters, people like yourself, Carrie, who are former litigators in some sense, and now they're just doing arbitrations for people, right? Which is a legitimate gig. But you can't use any of those people. You have to use the only approved Scientology firms that do that, right? So it's another form of punishment. It's not real. And in those cases, I wish someone would say to the judge, okay, can you assign an arbiter? Do not, we want a neutral party. We don't want Scientologists. We don't want somebody who's associated with us. Can you assign an arbiter to the case? Because that would bring about an actual solution.
Okay, so here's the difficulty. So in each of these cases, when Scientology is brought in the arbitration agreement, they have the lawyers that are trying to, bring these cases. They've had to argue against the arbitration, and then it's up to the judge to decide whether or not. And some of the cases have been successful, and then some of them haven't. So for example, in the Valerie Haney case, and this is horrific because she escaped in the boot of a car.
Right.
And she has had to undergo arbitration. And yes, so for example, when in the Jane Doe's case, the Danny Masterson civil suit, it was successfully argued, and the judge said that it's unconstitutional. The arbitration agreement is unconstitutional because of what it is, basically. You can't go back to your abuser. You've left this religion or whatever, and then you're being forced to go back and abide by its rules and its rulings. That doesn't make any sense. The Valerie Haney case, civil suit, she has had to undergo arbitration, which I can't even imagine how horrifying that has been. But it's not even finished, as far as I understand. She has to go back next year for more
Yes.
of these like convenings, and so on that point, Nora, is like you can't stipulate how the arbitration gets done, and the judge, because they cannot like they can't intervene with like the religious scriptures. They
Right.
can't say how it should be done. If they rule that Scientology, yes, can go ahead with arbitration, it has to be done how Scientology does arbitration. They can't stipulate. I mean, maybe they can. I mean,
But
they could
arbitration
if they
has a
had.
definition
But this comes
under
down
the
to the
law,
judge.
though. And that's the problem that I see in it, is that arbitration does have like a legal definition attached to it. And what happens in the Scientological arbitration is not arbitration. And that's where I'm
Agree with that.
finding this like technical
Agree.
loophole, because like it's specifically in Valerie Haney's case, they haven't allowed her lawyers in there with her. They're saying, oh, no outside people.
Correct.
And then they went back to the judge and were like, yo, this is sounding like it's not arbitration. So the judge was like, no, she gets to have her legal representation there. You can't tell somebody they can't have a lawyer. That's ridiculous. So then now her lawyer's
I'm
finally
not sure.
been there.
Did that happen?
I think
Okay.
I think they
So I
finally
wasn't sure
got
that
the
that
lawyer.
had happened.
No, it did
no.
not.
See,
Nope.
it's like that. You know what I mean? So then it gets
It's
into this.
crazy.
Okay, we're having a religious service, but it still doesn't fit the legal definition of arbitration if there's no receipts for it. Do you know what I mean? So this is where I think Scientology itself, honestly, is on thin ice, because if they're going to claim a legal like proceeding, which is, am I incorrect in stating that, Carrie, that an arbitration is a legally binding proceeding, right?
Arbitration can be binding or it can not be binding.
It
would depend.
But like in the case of Valerie Haney, they're saying this is our legally binding, sitch. This is what we're going to do instead of continuing this case in law, because we're a religion and we want to handle it via our religious scriptures, right? And
Correct.
So Nora, I
that's-
think there's an
yeah.
opportunity in the Valerie Haney case. Once she does all the arbitration, and it eventually, I mean, these guys, it makes me just like it makes me so enraged. Just the horror that victims are being put through again and again and again. But there is an opportunity for her attorney to then argue, once that has run its course, to then say, well, this is what they've ruled within their internal arbitration, and we disagree with that. The plaintiff, believes that or whatever, and then represents her and continues that then on. For Scientology, they'll just benefit themselves by just delaying and dragging out this arbitration and like into forever. Like, this is the craziness of it, is that all this control and everything, it gets to continue to be with the abuser. The judge, I mean, yeah. And so that's where it comes down to the judge. It really comes down to the judge's decision,
right,
what they're basing things on and who they are. And that varies judge to judge, even within Los Angeles courtrooms, depending on which judge is sitting there.
And one of the things with the arbitration, the religious arbitration clause, after doing all of my research on that, was the fact that it doesn't really, it's just a tug of war between legal definition of arbitration and their definition of religious arbitration. It's the fact that they put it in their contract that this is what would happen during that arbitration, or ADR, alternative dispute resolution, the arbitration is, and they signed that clause saying this is what's going to happen, and that's what it says. That's what they're doing. So they signed, whether they were 10, 12, or 50, that's what they signed, saying that's what they would agree to.
Yeah, and that the arbitration thing, this contract thing came into effect. I don't know exactly what date. I would say it's like early 2000s. But so it's an important point to make, because some people out there may not have ever signed an arbitration agreement. So don't think that is something that could block you if you were there earlier on. And also, I think that an arbitration agreement doesn't apply to certain things. Like if the case was, but correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, if the case was purely a sexual assault case, I don't think you would be talking about arbitration, would you?
Well, I mean, Mona's bringing up that this is contract based, and being sent into arbitration is usually because it's a provision of a contract agreement. And Nora, I know you've on your lives, you've talked about how they have them sign these things over and over and over again. They make sure that they hit them, especially once they turn 18.
Oh yeah.
So it's a contract interpretation.
Yeah, and that's very important to note, because like the contracts they have now, which I showed on my channel, for anybody joining either the C organization or staff, you are signing away like in multiple places, basically your civil rights away completely in the new STAS agreement. However, like when I joined the Sea Org back in 1995, there was nothing like that. And on top of that, I never signed what they deem a legal contract, which is a 2.5-year or 5-year staff contract. I only ever signed the billion-year Sea Org contract, which is fake-a-doodles, because the Sea organization doesn't exist. And obviously, I cannot live for 1 billion years. Science is not that great yet. We're not doing that. So that's a pledge. You know, it's a metaphoric pledge that I signed. It's not a legal contract for 1 billion years. And then they say when every course, every auditing action you do, you sign another piece of paper that says, I promise to pay in case of contract breakage. And you sign your name on that and date it, right? So in my case, because I never signed the legal contract, legally contracting me to any form of labor to them, all of those are null and void, right? Because they don't hold water anywhere. So like when they try to collect like free litter debts and things like that, it gets ridiculous. But it's just everything they do, they try to make you feel that it's super legal. Like even when I left, they had like 2 cameras in my face and they're making me sign all these. I don't even know what I fucking signed. I was so out of it. I was so just in another universe. I was just like, let me leave, you know, and they have you in a conference room in the OSIS into office, you know, like who's not going to sign, you know, like you just want to leave.
How is that not duress and coercion? Like it's not a valid contract if you sign it under duress and coercion.
Right.
And I think
that's the argument right now.
I think, didn't Valerie's lawyer try that argument?
Yes.
And unfortunately was not successful.
Yeah, again, because it's Florida. And Florida is like, they're just like, well, you know, if you guys can work it out yourself, sounds good to us. Beep, boop, beep. You know, like they just literally the judges there.
It's California.
I don't, you know. Oh, is she in California? You're right.
I think
you're right. You're right.
The Baxter case.
The Baxter one is in
what you're
Florida.
saying applies to the Baxter case is Florida.
Yeah.
I think the Valerie Haney one is in California. One of the most amazing, incredible things that Valerie Haney, and everyone should watch this. This appeared on Australian's 60 Minutes. There's a clip available on YouTube. But it featured Valerie Haney, and I think it was done at the end of last year, like following the Danny Masterson outcome. And she's so fucking sharp. She's incredibly just beautiful, but very well spoken. And one of the things that she said was, and I'm going to get it wrong, so please watch this, but watch a clip of her. But she said something like, but I also believed in, like, she signed her contract at like 8 years old, while at the same time, because I think she was asked like, well, did you believe in blah, blah, blah? And she's like, yeah, but I also believed in Santa Claus. Like, and it directly puts it into that frame of like, oh, we're talking about a child. We're talking about an 8-year-old child committing themselves to things that they do not understand. That it really is fantasy. That this is all, I mean, the Sea organization, it's fantasy. It's like Serge Delmar puts it so amazingly as well. The way that he talks about this is these are people dressing up in these costumes and they're coercing children into things that they cannot understand. That's why, you know, Serge, and, you know, we all repeat this, like, kids cannot consent, because the hashtag kids cannot consent, because children do not understand what this is. They still believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy or, do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, just puts it into that perspective. It's like, these are vulnerable people. They don't understand what they're doing. Also, when you're talking about Scientology children, they're largely undereducated. You know, a basic literacy is probably the foundation of their education, and that's about it in a lot of the cases, especially the Sea Org children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the crimes that they commit against the children.
Yeah. And that's deliberate because you're targeting a population for labor. Well, you only want to equip them with the things that are going to make them able to do the labor. This comes to human trafficking, and this is why we should at another stage talk about federal law, because when you're talking about human trafficking, there's state law, but there's also federal law. But those are lots of really important conversations in regards to that as well.
Yeah. Mona, can I share something on the screen here? Are you done with your?
Absolutely. Can you
your
do it?
slideshow? Yeah. Let me click on present.
I'm going to stop this screen.
Okay.
Ooh, big face.
Is it? Oh, let me put it up here. Okay. No, I don't want to do that. How do I?
And while you're doing that, I want to thank everybody that is sent super stickers and memberships. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I know Nora does too. I've got them all listed.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, do you see that down at the bottom there, Mona? Because this is your thingy bobber. Do you see that like little? Yes. It's not letting me put it. Okay, can you pop that? Okay. So just for Carrie, this is and we're only going to play a tiny bit of this because the people who own this leaked copy of orientation are very litigious. So just fair use here. We're just going to play a clip. Don't strike me down, Lord, people. Okay, here we go. Let me make sure I unmute it first. That's very important.
Wait a minute, it's me. Don't strike me.
Yeah, don't. Well, it's broadcasting on my channel too. So let's not. Here we go.
Activities in which you can participate.
So they put all these. I had it queued up a little bit further here. Here we go.
Officer services for the ecclesiastical redress of wrongs.
So now we go to the ethics section here. Okay.
It has been confirmed by the courts that civil authority cannot interfere in church disputes.
So this is very important. This is the orientation film, and they tell people right there in the film, civil authority cannot interfere in church disputes. Okay, so you go here to the ethics officer.
So you'll be happy to know that if
so
you
just
have a
sorry,
problem
pause 1 second, Nora.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, just 1 second. So just explain what the orientation film is, and that it is the first thing that a new Scientologist is shown.
Yeah. So like the people that they're handing out the tickets to, they're either watching this film or they are watching the Dianetics film, which teaches you about like how L. Ron discovered the reactive mind and cured himself of blindness and a broken back from World War II, neither injury of which happened at all to him in World War II. But yeah, so this is like the first thing that Scientologists see. It is showing you around the different parts of an organization and how it works and who you talk to and who you meet and all this stuff. Okay, so So you'll be happy to know that if you have a problem in Scientology, what now?
Scientology. There is a Scientology justice system available to you.
Okay, so you're going to stick with the Scientology justice system. You're not going to seek justice somewhere else. Okay, there's a Scientology justice system available to you.
You can resolve it. And most important, there are church services each Sunday.
See, church services each Sunday. So now we're going to go see who? The chaplain. Okay, now we go see the chaplain. Okay. No, zero Scientology churches have stained glass. Zero. It's bullshit.
Mother, take your child now, recognize and welcome here. And let us all go each our separate way, remembering that when we see Celeste again, we have welcomed her this day.
Okay, they had to play the most innocent and non-gobbledygook part of the naming ceremony, so it seemed like a legit thing that happens. And every Scientology, I mean, I don't know if you got this. We don't get baptized, but you have a naming ceremony in which you are gifted godparents and that sort of thing. You know, and it's a really, oh God, one day I'll just do a breakdown of all the ceremonies in the ceremonies book. It's insane.
But they don't believe in God, so how can you get a godparent?
And everybody, there's so much clapping in Scientology. So much clapping. Look at Larry. He's just so happy to be there talking to Michael Roberts. Look at me. Larry Anderson, the guy who's the narrator in this, is now out of Scientology. He famously requested all of his money back and recorded Tommy Davis as he was making this request and got Tommy Davis on tape saying a lot of really stupid shit. But anyway.
The christening.
Yes, indeed. I married him, you know.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, does anyone have to change their faith to obtain services here?
Oh no, all denominations are welcome here. The common denominator of all religions is the human spirit.
Like, this is just the dumbest thing ever,
And
right?
Scientology can attain the long-sought religious goal of knowing one's potential.
I don't know that that's ever been a religious goal. I don't believe that you go to catechism to
No.
find out your potential.
In addition to what we've mentioned, is there any other pastor service these good people should know about?
Well, you might say that I'm a port of last call. When nobody else can handle it, one is always free to bring it to the chaplain.
Right there.
There you go.
Right there.
Bingo.
So
Sometimes, when someone can't afford professional
So this
auditing,
is like a
I can
catch
persuade some
net.
students.
Yeah.
Sorry, just for a sec. So the chaplain is the catch net. It's like you tried to handle it here. You spoke to the ethics officer, you persuaded that nothing was resolved. You're literally at your last straw. I'm ballistic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go. That's where a person is really gonna be breaching over to. I want to go public, or I want to file this, or I want to file this report.
I want money.
Civil, whatever.
Mhm.
Right? I want to speak to an attorney. Okay, that is the final. This is your last port of call. So it's this real catch net of like anything that's kind of gonna come out. This exposure is going to try and grapple that. That's why you see the chaplain across a lot of these cases being mentioned.
Right. And then there's also this piece of gold here. This is an interview between the gentleman on, you guys are not seeing what's on my screen now. I just changed it. What's happening? Share this tab. Sorry. Here we go. So this is, no, don't play. What are you doing? This is Jeffrey Augustine here on the left, and that's Matt Pesh on the right. Matt was a former, he worked at Flag. He covered up a lot of stuff.
Right.
And this is the clip where he just brings this up like at the very end. Oh, one more thing, like a Columbo moment here, while they've been talking about all kinds of stuff. But this is where he talks about the trafficking of people to get them away from their crimes.
Great having you on the show. You are a wealth of information.
I'll tell you one other thing. You kind of
Yeah,
what we're
please.
talking about.
Literally, they're at the end. It's at 53 minutes here.
Yeah.
Scientology claims to be the experts on the human mind, and we should get rid of psychiatry and obliterate them, and blah 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 blah. But the truth is, as soon as a staff member or a public person has a psychotic break, which is fairly often,
Okay. Fairly often. Just note that for the record, guys, that fairly often, not only people doing Scientology who are paying for it have a psychotic break, but people delivering the Scientology, signing the billionaire contracts, fairly often have psychotic breaks.
there's money set aside to get that person out of there immediately.
There's money set aside to get that person out of there immediately. They have a slush fund set aside just to cover that up. Okay.
And these people are just usually
So
dropped,
in terms of
literally dropped on the doorstep of some relative or friend who's not even a Scientologist and left there.
Mm.
They
That-
just, yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
a
in
violation.
terms of covering up criminal, so let's go. I think it's around the 40-minute mark. This is really just off the top of my head. So Matt Pesh, and he was the Treasury Sec, I believe, for Flag. He was in charge of the finances. It might be, I don't know the timestamp on this one, but there's two videos. There's one that he did on Amy Scobie, his wife, partner, whatever, his wife's channel, where he talks about this, and that's also in this one. Sorry, if I just go back, I think it's like halfway, to be honest. I think it's about halfway. Go to the halfway mark. He starts talking about, Jeffrey Augustine brings up Alexander Gents. Now, he first says the molestation. I want to correct that. He does correct it later on. That's child rape. It's not being molested. It's literal child rape. The kid was 12 years old at the time. And the perpetrator, Marie Warren, was in her 40s.
Oh, yeah. I was on the RPF with
And
her at
this
PAC.
is where Matt Pesh talks about the OSA drill. Okay. This is where they talk about the OSA drill because they moved both the perpetrator and the victim from out of Florida to California in this case. So see if you can find. God, I wish I had the timestamp on this. Hang on. I think you're going back too far. Go forward a bit. Wait, so OJ, stop. Wait, go. Ah, God, I wish I had play a bit of it and then, but go back a bit. Sorry, go to like
You're good.
go to like the 25-minute mark and just see what they're talking about there. See what they're talking about 25 minutes.
Sure.
That year
no, it's not
where
that one.
so much money was being taken from the financial planning for the legal case. Yeah, that's how that worked out for that year. That was how
It's
bad
just
it was.
after this.
They were talking in that quote right there. He's talking about the fact
Lisa
that
McPherson.
during 1997, during the prosecution of the Lisa McPherson case and the civil, all the cases, that they literally paid out to the whole staff of the flag service organization $500 total for the year for all the staff. So it was like pennies people were making for that year, because they literally were saying, oh, we don't have any money because we're spending all this on this legal stuff. I mean, like,
Right.
they make billions of dollars. They literally make tens of millions of dollars per week. And we're like, oh, we can't give you $50 because, Lisa McPherson,
Matt,
I think he was talking about that it
several
drained the
restaurants.
funds of the. Okay, I think they were talking about how the case had drained the funds of the organization, but the $500 thing I think was maybe in connection to when a senior member left, they were given $500, like see ya, like that kind of thing. In Los Angeles, it was like $400. Yeah. Maybe go to like the 30-minute mark, see what they're talking about. Oh, stop.
Their own room. Is it just lack of room?
Why is it?
maybe it's the other video because there's two of them.
Oh, okay.
Because there's two videos where Jeff interviews Matt. But this one specifically was like just a throwaway. That's why I brought it up. It's just throwaway at the end where he talks about the slush fund. And then the other video, he talks about Alexander Jench and Marie Warren. But yeah, I mean, the evidence
so this
about all this
slush
stuff is
fund. Okay, so sorry. Let me just. Sorry, Nora, just for a sec. So this slush fund that he's talking about is basically there are funds sitting there that accumulate that can be used to handle any kind of situation. Like, what could those situations be? They could be, for example, how he said, to like get a psychotic, someone who's gone psychotic, away from the base, and because they were worried about suicides or death because of Lisa McPherson. And so they would want to move them. But the other thing that he talks about in this other video, I think you are right, I think it is the other video, where he's talking about the slush fund is also used for cover up of sexual assault of children and adults.
Yeah.
Part one. Yeah, maybe it's in part one. And so this money that he's sitting on as, being in charge of Treasury, in charge of the funds, they could pay for flights to send somebody out of the country or to send them interstate. Like one example he talks about, I can't remember if it's in this one or another one, but okay, perfect.
Yeah, here you go.
Sometimes with adults too. But
it's just before this. Back it up just a little bit.
Yeah, no, he's about to talk about it. Here we go.
Saying those people are gone. They're
there we go.
It's a very specific thing I'd like to ask you about.
Oh, yeah, just before.
Alexander Jench was sexually molested by a Sea Org member at Flagland Base.
Right.
He was 12 years old. She was about 40.
Yep.
This is discovered.
I just want to point out, this is an extreme trigger warning for people in the chat. Also, it never fails to enrage me the callousness with which Matt Pesch answers these questions about Jeffrey Augustine's stepson, who is now dead. I just wanted to say that. Just
the sexual molestation. What?
And it's statutory rape, Jeffrey. Let's use the right terms.
What happens once this is discovered?
It's not even statutory rape, Nora. It's child rape.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sorry, even Nora. More. I was going to say it's not even statutory rape. Under Florida law, it's child rape. Yeah.
There you go.
What happens in that kind of situation, and that ain't the only one of those. There's been a number of those. And what happens is
You see how he just says that? There's been a number of these are the ones that he knows about, guys, because he ran the fund. So I'll let him finish.
The people are gotten out of the state immediately. So, for me as a Treasury Secretary, I need to find money and cut a check and get plane tickets, and those people are gone.
Boom. He just facilitated like human trafficking of felons across state lines, sometimes internationally. If the person was like here in America on an R1 visa, they would just be deported back to their home country and transferred there, or transferred to the European branch of the Sea Org because, they're European. Fuck it, they can be there. Right. It's just and he's like, I know of hundreds of those. And that's just from his brief time in the Sea Org. Like that's why we're talking about this, guys. That's why we're talking about exactly this. I mean, I have the Mike Rinder clip too, but I don't think we really need that. That's for another time. But it's the same way Matt just sort of brushes this off. Mike Rinder does the same thing. I'll link it.
Exactly.
I'll link it in here so you guys can see it. It's at the where are we at? The 33-minute mark. I'll put but this is the interview. Mike Rinder answers Mirriam Frances's allegations, which he didn't answer one single one of them. I'm just going to say that for the record.
This video pissed me off big time.
Yeah, but I'll put a link to that. I'll put the start link in there so you guys can get to it easy. But notice also, just it's the callousness with which people who were in this say these things as if it's nothing. And somebody's correcting me here that he didn't say
Nora,
hundreds.
just wait.
Yeah.
Don't move it yet. Don't move it yet. I just want you to play a little bit further because it's the chuckling for me.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Every
Here
time these say, thank you for bringing up that point, Nora, about the callousness. And then there's also absolutely not recognizing the harm to the actual fucking people that this happened to. Recognize the harm. You hurt people. It's not just a matter of, then I cut a check for this. Go fuck yourself. You're a fucking criminal and you hurt people, including children, and you facilitated the cover up. I'm enraged. We should be enraged about it. And these people, they chuckle. It's disgusting and disturbing. But this is literally how this is how current Scientologists talk about these things.
Correct.
Minimized. It's like some kind of inside joke. Yeah.
Here we go.
Just play. Yeah.
Depending on
so Osa, the Office of Special Affairs sends Alexander somewhere, and the woman who rapes him somewhere else.
Right.
And you just write the checks.
Yeah.
You said that there were more. I mean, how many sexual molestations were you aware of at Flagland Base of children?
Shit. It sometimes was adults too. But let's see. So there was rapes of adults too. But let me see.
Really?
Yeah. Children. I don't know. I can think of two right off. Alexander and about a 12-year-old girl.
And then so there's rapes where men raped women. And this doesn't get reported to the police.
No.
This is shocking that the church intentionally covers up felony sexual rapes or sexual molestations.
Yep.
And its handling is to get the people out of the state, out of the jurisdiction.
Yep.
Marie Warren, the woman who sexually molested Alexander Jench, and you confirmed this online when Karen first posted the story, and we're deeply grateful to you for doing that because the truth must come out. Marie Warren, the woman who molested Alexander Jench, she became an OSA operative. And it's...
Wait a minute. We know that name.
You know Marie Warren?
Yeah, she's been in all sorts of documents.
Yeah. Yeah, she really? Came, they moved Alexander and Marie from Flag to California. Marie went to the RPF. I was on the RPF with her on the Rehabilitation Project Force. Okay. And Alexander was then posted in the Los Angeles area. And he worked at various places before he eventually
Nora,
left the organization.
No, they placed him at the ranch. at a remote
A first?
location where I was.
Wow.
And yeah. And I already knew Alexander Gents because I was at one stage very close with, or was like best friends with Heber Gents's stepdaughter. So, and this is a very mixed family. So I had first met Alexander Gents in Heber Gents's apartment on the 4th floor of the Anthony building, because
Okay.
I was friends with his stepsister. It was her birthday, actually. And at that time, he was living with his mother. So this is years and years prior. Then, and this is a kid who got moved around quite a bit. So he gets
Right.
moved to Flag. Then he gets moved to the ranch school. He was there for a bit. Then he gets placed into the Sea Org in Los Angeles. But it's like, so now the Sea Org owns him. You see what I mean? They can just do whatever, move him
Yeah.
here, there, wherever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah, and Marie Warren went on to do various ops for OSA afterwards. Like I still don't understand like how somebody, you know, I mean, talk about somebody who's got the thumb of, you know, Scientology over them, right? You know, she should be in jail. But yeah. It's just
So there's another case, I think, I can't remember if he talks about it in this one or the other one or in both, but there is the case of a girl who was sexually assaulted by a man named Dick Hubbard. Dick Hubbard was married to an OSA staff member. So
It's
just
this
play
one.
on a little bit. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
mentioned here. Okay.
Mind-boggling to think she commits a sexual felony, then she becomes an OSA operative. The thing, Matt, is Scientology is not an abstract thing. It's actually made out of people.
Right.
Doing things. It's made out of people doing their jobs every day. One of my friends who was once a high-ranking executive said, "You don't appreciate, Jeff, that the Church of Scientology is made out of thousands of people working long hours every day. That's one reason it's so tough." How do you feel on a human level seeing this? Is it again, does your thought stopping kick in?
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of mentally geared that the survival of the group is everything, and the individual is secondary, or big time,
But you yourself then, because the Sea Org, the Scientology in general, Sea Org in particular, says no case on post, no HENR, no human emotion reaction. So you learn to not only turn off your thoughts, but turn off your feelings.
Yeah, you do. Yes, you do.
But when you have that bottled up inside, I mean, something eventually breaks. It snaps. What happened with you? When did it break?
It's a gradient. I mean, one of the real wake-up calls for me was we were at a staff meeting where you have all the staff on Thursday night. You get together and you go over the production of the week and your plans for the next week. And it gets announced by the captain. And it was not her idea. This is obviously pushed down from RTC. But
Sure.
what she's announcing is there is not going to be any more special schedules for those who are old or sick that can't do the complete full schedule. If you can't do the complete full schedule, then you will be fitness boarded out of the Sea Org. You're given your couple $100 or whatever and hit the road. And I was like, holy shit, man, I've already been here for a long time, and what am I going to work until I can't work no more? I can't do.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to find the Dick Hubbard thing, but
Okay.
like that's another thing that like this is another level.
It's in the
It's in the other one.
yeah. So Nora, so it must be in the other one. It's
Okay.
it's on Amy Scobie's channel, and it's I think it's called like part one. It's like Matt
Okay.
Pesh part one.
Yeah, we'll have to.
But
yeah.
but in that one, they moved the girl out of the country. So that was one of those ones. But notice how, see, Jeffrey Augustine, this is really well done. You can hear the feeling in his voice when he's talking about this. Like for Jeffrey Augustine, this is very real. These are real crimes happened by real, that were done by real people. Whereas Matt Pesh is talking about it like he's so separate from it. Then we get to, and Jeffrey Augustine's like, well, there must have been some tipping point somewhere. Okay, well, we get to the tipping point. What is it? It's when Matt Pesh got uncomfortable with his own circumstances. He didn't like that in the future, he wasn't going to be looked after. These are criminals who are working for a mafia type organization. When it wasn't working out for him, he decided that was a tipping point for him. The tipping point wasn't like, oh, we're covering up crimes. That was all okay to him. So this is the mentality of these people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I've spent this much money and spent this much time. If I say something, then it'll hurt me. Right.
Correct.
And if you look at other people who have historically, Nora did a really great coverage of like just looking at the history of people who have spoken out about Scientology. If you take Frank Oliver, for example, and he was a former OSA agent, and when he talks about the tipping point for him was like, hey, we're doing things that are not okay, and I'm not comfortable with them. We're doing some bad things, and I didn't know that that's what I was signing up for. He wasn't comfortable with the things that were being required of him. That was the tipping point for him. Gary Scarf, I believe, similarly, it was like, well, we're doing things that, like, I'm not comfortable with. Like, these are not the things that I thought I would be doing. So this is a really good sort of pinpointing of like this criminality. This is why I call Matt Pesh a criminal, because when he was committing the crimes, he wasn't experiencing any level of discomfort with it. And that is very clear in his own words. That's my opinion. Yeah.
I agree. I concur. I concur. I mean, I think, just to, I mean, we got to put a pin in this thing. We've been here 3.5 hours, ladies. This is a lot. There's been a ton of questions that have come by. So much accolades for you. And of course, Carrie for being here and things like that and all the super chats. And I can't click on them and bring them up because Mona's in charge. Mona's in charge.
I have no idea how to get all of the questions.
So go to where it says starred.
Yes.
In the thing, do you see? And then go up to the top and just click the first one and it'll bring it up on the screen.
All it has is super chats.
Right. So that's because, do you have mods signed into your StreamYard?
No.
Okay. So if you get your I'm just giving a StreamYard infomercial here. But if you get your mods signed in, they can star the comments for you next time. And then they will all be in the starred section, not just super chats. Right.
Okay.
Okay. And then you go through, then you can pull up the questions or not, but they pretty much know what you want to ask or don't ask or whatever. Right. It's different than in my system where I literally have to type in question or comment and then search for that in my streams because I'm not on StreamYard anymore. But, look, see, like Haggis Basher just like put in a $20 Canadian super chat. Thank you for that. But I just think, I just think that there's been a lot of love in the chat for everybody. A lot of these people in the chat have been sharing their own stories of abuse. And I just want to thank all of you guys in chat for being vulnerable, for hearing us, and for, feeling comfortable enough to share with your fellow, internet friends here, all of those very, very private things. But I hope that this has like encouraged you guys to know that you can get recourse. You can get justice through the legal system. It is a bit to navigate. People like Carrie, I'm just going to pimp you out here, Carrie, real quick, are here for the questions, because she's a law professional, and maybe she can help you find a lawyer in your area that can work with you to get your case going and things like that, and Mona is a wealth of information, as is Mirriam, on this topic, who's been a warrior princess, just fighting for 12 years on her own for her case here. And I just have so much admiration for that. I can't even honestly adequately express it in words. But the thing about it is that what Mirriam said at the very beginning, that like you just focus on the very first thing you're going to do and then the very next thing you're going to do. So if the first step that you have to take, right, is even just with yourself, okay, let's dial it all the way back before we even get to legal stuff. If the first step you have to take is with yourself to be like, this happened, this is real, then you should do that. If you do that with a mental health professional, or maybe if you have a pastor that you trust or something like that, someone who you can talk to and tell exactly what happened, who's just there to listen, right, and hold space for you in that moment, that may be the actual first step. And then consult with some sort of legal representation to figure out, how do you move forward? How do you get justice for that horrific act that happened to you? But always start with yourself and hold space for yourself. This is the hardest part for any victim, is to look in the mirror and be able to say, that happened. It's real. I didn't make it up, and I'm gonna be okay. And so that's, I've seen a lot of that start tonight, which I think is really incredible. It makes me incredibly emotional to see people like reclaiming their power like that. I just think that it's really important to start here and then move forward. I'm getting verklempt, but yeah.
I know, you're making me verklempt, Nora.
I know. Got the tears going here. And to be real honest, I will put those 2 lawyers in the description. They are prepared to take your phone calls.
Wonderful.
Just to ask questions.
That's fantastic.
Nora, that was so beautifully put and so heartfelt. Like I have like kind of like a uncomfortable pain in my chest. It's just from, it's not uncomfortable really, but it's like there's so many years and there's so many people, that this has affected, but it's gone on for years and years and years, and we have to get to a turning point. I wanted to mention as well that historically the median age for people coming forward to talk about sexual assault, particularly like childhood sexual assault or abuse, is 50 years old today. Now go back 10 years or 20 years, it would have been higher, 60 years old, 70 years old. So everything is moving forward. But I love that you touched on seek that support for yourself first, because I absolutely 100% want to underline that. And reaching out to a helpline is a really good way to do that, because they can refer you to something local in your area as well. But therapy, 100% underline it. But not all of us can afford it. That's why a free helpline is really helpful in that regard. Now, the reason why, generally speaking, why it takes so long for people to come forward is because that people need to feel safe first. We need to feel secure enough first before we can take that step. Even like our brain and body, this is the signaling as well, like, oh, okay, we're ready now, because we're not under threat. But that could be, stability is really, really important. So having stable housing, having stable income, having friends who will support you, having family members who will support you, getting yourself to a point of where you feel safe enough. So all these things are important. These things take time. There's no rush on anything. And also decide, like, when talking about justice, it could be possible that justice is not the thing that you want. Some people just want the healing, and that is very true. For me, the justice part has always been a huge thing for me, and that's my personal thing. But that is not the case for everyone. I know that some people just want to heal that chapter of their lives and be able to fully live and fully express themselves in their current life, so they can actually live their life. And so those can be things that can be addressed. They would be addressed differently. You're addressing trauma, you're addressing rehabilitation, and all those kinds of things. So just as you can see, there's an array of avenues of different ways that people can go about it, and all of it's valid, and it all comes back to what Nora said. It's all about the self, and it's what sits here is to how you feel and what you can do, and what you feel like you need to do.
And if this panel gave you the impression we're talking about the very legal aspects of this tonight, which is very important that people understand what legal recourse they have, but it is like, I love what you just said, Mirriam, because if you're not like, I don't want to do the court thing, I just want to heal from it, please, I put the rain.org in there several times tonight. Reach out and find a therapist that you match with. Guys, I had to go through like 5 therapists before I found like my chupacabra of therapists who gets me, who understands my ADHD brain, my Scientology brain, all of the things to heal from that trauma, because it's not a 1-minute conversation. It's not even a 1-year thing. Healing from this type of trauma or any, severe trauma, is a very delicate, very important process. And if that's just you talking about it and trying, there's so many therapies now to avail yourself of, and not going through the court system. I don't want anyone to feel like, well, if you don't go to the court, you didn't do it right, because that's another form of like shaming and like making you feel bad, because it's not, that journey isn't for everyone, and that's okay. It's okay if you don't, file charges or talk to the police or anything like that, right? And for the people who are going that route, who are like, I'm inspired tonight to do this, then please reach out to Mirriam, to Carrie, to Fat Grammy, to me, and any resources that we have available, we will like gladly give you on that journey, because that is, it's not something to do on your own. It is, you know what I mean? It's a road traveled best with backup and teams, and we're definitely here. I'm speaking for everybody, but we're definitely here to help you in any way possible on that journey, that we can.
Well, I can't believe Mirriam isn't actually in law school.
Hang on, go ahead, Carrie. What?
I was just I can't believe Mirriam's not actually in law school, because
that's her big secret.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I wish I was. I love it.
If somebody wants to send Mirriam the funds to go to law school in Australia, please do.
Yes.
There's no official GoFundMe, but she has the other PayPals and stuff. Mirriam should be, what do they call? Is it a barrister in Australia, or what is it? Or is it a lawyer?
Listener and barrister.
Barrister. Okay, let's get Mirriam to barrister school.
You guys. You guys just made me a bit emotional there, because one of the things that I feel most ashamed about in my childhood is the lack of education, because that's something that has affected me, like in terms of like mentally affected me. I carry the shame about lack of education. That we were deliberately undereducated. That was deliberate. That was part of the crime that was committed against us. And I've always wanted to do further education. I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to get good jobs and to pursue a career. But I was never able to sort of like fully go back to, I've never been in a position where I could keep supporting myself while being educated. I've done some courses here and there. Crime is something that I'm very passionate about. Justice, I'm very passionate about. And I just wanted to emphasize, like, we are talking about these crimes are committed to against largely children, but mostly people who were uneducated, undereducated deliberately. And so that's a really important thing. If I do get an opportunity to do that in future, I would absolutely take it up. But there's so much we can do without having to do like a full, get a degree and that kind of thing, or have it as our profession. I so appreciate you, Carrie, for being part of this conversation.
Of course.
Because
thank you.
You've been able to lend your professional experience and knowledge. Yeah, and it's going to benefit us. It's going to keep benefiting us to have involvement by people like you. And also Mona is very, the crime aspect of things and justice is really, really a passion of hers, I can tell. And so that's, just an amazing thing that we have access to in this community, is other people's passions and their experience and knowledge. And so that's just, going to keep benefiting us. 2 books I want to recommend, because the other thing that's nearly free is, first of all, the internet's pretty much free, depending on where you're getting it from. But you can always go to a library. And also books can be free if you're getting them from a library, but they can be very cheap to purchase online. But 2 books I want to recommend is Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, and that focuses on trauma and ways of recovery, and also kind of breaks down like, what is this trauma, particularly with sexual assault. I'll just say this is that the injuries are very internalized. They do not show up in scars in our body tissue, but they are absolutely present on a cellular level. And it can feel inescapable. When we talk about safety, a victim needs to feel safe first before they can report. They still may not feel safe inside their own bodies. So there are still those challenges to overcome. We can support those people with knowledge and ways of recovering. So The Body Keeps the Score is a really good one. And the other one is The Invisible Machine by Jamie Mustard and the Dr. Nora, Dr. Lipoff. that's a really great one, because when we talk about trauma that can be inescapable, particularly with sexual assault, this is the one thing that I did read that book. I got the treatment, and I'm living without that pain today. And so that is an incredible thing for me. I'm able to get back to living my life, which is completely life-changing for me.
That's wonderful.
I will second that emotion on the treatment and the book from our mutual friend Jamie. I've not had the honor of meeting Dr. Eugene Lipov, but that treatment is completely life changing in terms of people who suffer from CPTSI, which is complex post traumatic stress injury, because it's not a disorder, it's actual physical injury to your brain and your nervous system. And it will, for anybody who's had that type of trauma, you don't just have to have the privilege of growing up in a cult like me and Mirriam to, be qualified for that. This is a treatment that the military gives to returning veterans, to help them with their CPTSI from combat. So it is that revolutionary. It is that just totally life-changing. But I'm going to I put links for both of them here if you're inclined to buy books. Full disclosure, that is from my Amazon thing. So if you buy it, I get 10 cents. Okay, full disclosure, just let you know. Most of the money goes to Jamie. I know. My God. But I'm just, full disclosure. It's, it's my personal Amazon link that's on there. And yes, I'll put the links in the replay also. But those two books, and it's so important to understand what's happening with you, not just understand the law, which is so complicated because it's in Latin, which is rude. But to understand what's happening here so that you can pursue your legal justice if that's the choice that you take. I really think, we need like a Cliff's Notes version or something that's not Latin, it's like, ugh.
That would be so much nicer to have something that's
right?
just boom, boom, boom.
Like, can you imagine if Gen Z, just real quick, if Gen Z was writing the laws now, like, this is so mid. Like, you guys, skibbity toilet, you're in, we're putting you in the clink. Yeet to the clink. All right. Like, that would be the whole thing. It'd be amazing. But yeah.
It's amazing.
That would be a lot more fun to read.
Oh my God.
Right?
We could probably
they should have, those drop down. They should have like one of those kind of quiz style things. It's like you click yes, and then it goes, okay, so did this incident occur before 2009, for example? And you're like,
right.
Yes, it did. And then it goes, shoot. Okay, did yours occur? Da 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 da. Was it covered up? Da, da, da. Was it covered up before this year or whatever? Did you report it? Da, 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 and just give you this whole map. I wish that was available. But there is a really good website I do want to recommend if you are looking at pursuing a criminal case in the state of California. Mona, are you able to check that website up? Which is basically, it breaks down, it's like an overview of the criminal process in California. And I think that's really handy if that's something you're looking at, because it's going to give you an idea like, okay, this thing happens and then it goes to this person, and that thing happens and then it goes to this, because there's a whole process that we don't see in these like TV shows and stuff like that. Yeah.
Let me go back to it because I was looking at it. Here we go.
Yeah.
Present. Share. I got to talk myself through it.
It's okay. You just Samuel Jackson your way through it. Da-na-na-na-na. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. For the state of California, and it's a self-help guide. Yeah. So the charges are filed, then there's arraignment, and then there's the pretrial activities. Can you scroll down a bit? Yes, Nora is a great teacher.
Who put that comment
Trial,
up?
sentencing, after sentencing. So if you click in each of these links, then it will break it down even further for you. So that's just a really handy guide for anyone that's looking at a case in California, just to give you an idea. But like I said, I'll say it again, but just focus on the one thing that is right in front of you. Do that, then figure out the next thing and go from there.
Yeah, I put the link in the chat.
Perfect.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, you guys, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me and letting me host and be a total ditz on not doing the comments. Sorry about that. I was fangirling too much on Mirriam, Nora, and Carrie. So I get
And then you put this comment up, like, as I can't click on any comments, guys. I just want you to know this is not my StreamYard.
Oh,
So-
this is going in the Reddit. It's going in the Reddit.
Right? Nora's just like taking over.
See,
Oh,
I
always.
clicked on that then.
Hi, Rhett. You did. You did.
Did I? Oops,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. You clicked. No one else can click on the Mona. I love you so much.
Me? I did it.
I know. Well, hello to Reddit and OSA. Thank you guys for tuning into our legal discussion this evening. I hope you all learned something. And those of you who are listening under the radar, listen, y'all got cases too. Okay. Contact us on the low
They've
low
got
from some
current
weird
cases.
email. It's all right. I look at all my emails, even the weird ones. And, you know, we can help you out. We have foundations to help you out with that. We have all kinds of stuff, but we have resources. And whatever step you're on, even if it's just I'm still asking questions, ask the questions. Ask us questions, okay?
Well, thank you
But not-
for letting me
not in
join
the chat.
you guys.
Thank you for
Oh.
being here, Carrie. And thank you for
Oh,
always
thank you.
supporting, helping out, and just like encouraging. You're fucking amazing. And thank you for, you know, clarifying all this legal schmeagle stuff.
Oh, the best I can. Well, you know, Mirriam and Nora, I mean, my hat's off to you guys. You know, you're survivors. You're strong, intelligent, wonderful women who have accomplished far more than anything that those people who, you know, maybe didn't see you for what you were. You've gone far beyond what they thought you might be able to do. And not only that, and you're speaking out and you're sharing. And that's giving strength to other people. So I'm really super impressed with both of you, and I'm so grateful to be able to be here with you guys. So thank you.
Yeah, and Mirriam,
Thank
you know
you
what?
so
My
much.
grandma, my fat Grammy, the one that I love so much, she graduated high school when she was 63 years old.
There you go.
Wow.
Yep, because
That's
that was always
amazing.
important to her. So
Yeah,
don't ever
that's
give up.
amazing. Okay.
Well,
I would like to
Okay.
do that. I would like
Guys.
to get my high school certificate. Thank you so much, Carrie, Mona, Nora. You guys have been amazing. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks,
Good night,
guys.
everybody.
Just stay on, you guys, just for a second.
We'll stay here, but you got to end it,
Yeah.
Mona. You got